Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest installment of Two Matts, One Steve. Tonight, we're going to chat the Obi Wan Kenobi show, and I know that this is the episode you've all been waiting for. All three of you have been waiting patiently to hear our thoughts on Obi Wan Kenobi. Joining me tonight, incredibly happy and excited, who just finished watching the show. I binge watched it. Ronan.
Yeah, that knocked it all out. Well, I can't say in one sitting because I got to the last episode last night. I was like, I need to go to bed. I'm already not really paying much attention to this show. And I watched the last episode this morning.
All right. And another person who binge watched most of it, the first 5 episodes, and then watched the finale, is Steve.
Yep, I'm here. Star Wars is dead to me.
So I think by our initial reactions, I'm sure the audience can kind of get an idea of how this review / discussion is going to go. I guess I'll start it out by saying when we watched the Book of Boba Fett, our disappointment was palpable, and
Your disappointment was palpable. Steve and I didn't care.
I still think you guys thought it was kind of shitty, though. Like the show.
I definitely thought it was shitty, but I wasn't expecting good going into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I had no fucks to give about Obi-Wan. We made that very clear in our very first discussion of it.
Now, I did bring up the question at the time, and I was like, a lot of Star Wars fans are very pissed off about what they did to Boba Fett and how they wrote the character. And I said, surely they're not going to do this to Obi Wan Kenobi. And if they do fuck up Obi Wan Kenobi, how is the fandom sort of going to react to that? So we'll circle back around to that question after we sort of discuss this. Ronan, I'm going to go to you since it's fresh in your mind. You just binge watched this show. Tell me, what's the basic storyline of Obi Wan Kenobi about? Why are we telling this story?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know why we're telling the story. This is a story that didn't need to be told. It fills in 0 holes in the Star Wars, in the original trilogy that needed to be filled in. It does not need to exist, and thus forth is pointless. And it doesn't serve any purpose. As far as what the show is about, it's a newly created bad guy decides that she is going to enact the plot line of Mass Effect 3, but on Leia Organa.
All right, let me take over here.
Okay.
All right, Reva, who is a member of the Empire's Inquisition, she's also known as Third Sister. She has a vendetta against Obi Wan Kenobi. She looks through some I guess, Empire's records from back in the day that just happened to be lying around, and she discovered that Bail Organa is close friends with Obi Wan Kenobi, and she figures out that, well, hey, Bail Organa's got a kid. If I kidnap the kid, surely Obi-Wan will come to the rescue. And he does. And Obi-Wan, it's 10 years on from the end of Revenge of the Sith. He hasn't been keeping up with his training. He works at, a meat factory of some sort.
He's keeping a low profile. He's cut himself off from the Force.
He's keeping a low profile. He's lost all of his powers, all of his abilities. He is just a dude at this point, but still, his friend Bail Organa calls him back into service, and so he goes and hunts down Leia, rescues her, and that leads him to Reva, at which point we discover Reva's backstory and her master plan. It turns out she was a youngling that Anakin Skywalker attacked and failed to kill, which you're going to notice a theme throughout the rest of this series. So she survives the end of Revenge of the Sith with a grudge against Anakin. So she's mad at Anakin for killing her Jedi family, and so she goes to the dark side and decides that the best way to get revenge on Anakin for killing Jedi is to begin killing Jedi herself, and that will eventually lead her to Kenobi, and then she can catch Kenobi and turn Kenobi into Vader, and that will give her a chance to kill Vader. So, She's mad at Vader for killing Jedi, so she's going to kill Jedi to get revenge on Vader for killing Jedi. Are you with me here? You got all that?
Mass Effect 3. Yo, dog.
And then, of course, you get the expected twist, where at the end Reva regrets her actions, turns over a new leaf, and after having her life spared several times for no reason, just kind of wanders off. And cut. That's the fucking show.
All right, good episode. I'll see you guys later.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, so let's get to your guys' thoughts.
I bet
first.
you are
So many
the
thoughts.
most disappointed in all of this.
Everyone knows, anyone who's listened to any of these shows and knows me well, Steve, you know this particularly well, I'm a Star Wars apologist. Like, it's really hard for me to dislike Star Wars stuff.
But we know we've insulted your bizarre theories on this matter several times.
Yep. I hated this show. Like, hated it. I thought this was a betrayal, again, of more legacy characters. The writing, I thought, was terrible. The storytelling was terrible. I thought the acting by everyone involved was pretty terrible. And this thing ended on I mean, it's hard for me to put into words my disappointment and hatred of this show. And it's I mean, I'll throw it to you first, Ronan. You went into this with no real expectations. You're just like, yeah, you didn't even want to watch it. So tell me how you felt while you were watching this.
I tried my best to go into this with a open, null mind, the power of nothingness. I was just going to go into the show and just coast on through. Because I hadn't seen any YouTube videos on it. I hadn't read any articles on any episodes. But a thing kept getting in the way of me going into this cold. And that was you people. You just kept
What do you mean, you people?
You just kept on going into the Discord, going into the Monday night episodes, talking about how bad this show was. So I was like last night, just like, all right, let's get this shit show underway. Just, shit sandwich, take a big bite, get it over with, tastes great. So I go into it with that expectation. Now, if anyone here should be upset more so at this than you, it should be me, because I was always of the impression that Ewan McGregor was the single best thing about the prequel trilogies. They suck, they're terrible in every way except for him. He is exceptionally good in the role of Obi-Wan. So it's like, if anything, it's like, okay, we're going to, my favorite character from those movies is getting his own show. This should be pretty good, and then Book of Boba Fett tells me, it's like, oh god, yeah, they really don't know what they're doing with Star Wars. Oh my god. So I go into that, so that's my mindset for going into this, is I've already heard from the Star Wars fanboys in our group, you and Rachel, that this show sucks. So it's like, oh god, if the fanboys are lashing out on it now, well, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that in a more gender appropriate, if the fandom is lashing out at this show now, it can't be good. And then I go and I watch that first episode. I'm like, this is really good.
First episode's not bad. The first episode's entertaining.
That
Real
first
quick,
episode is good. Go for it.
I want to point something out. According to Rachel, we are the outliers. It seems like the fandom actually really, really enjoyed this, and then here's us with our alternate correct opinion.
I did post a link to the Rotten Tomatoes. So the Rotten Tomatoes says this has like a 63% audience fresh rating, which means there's a lot of people that dislike it. Now, how many people actually dislike it, I don't know, because whenever we're talking about the quote-unquote fandom, it's always anecdotal, right? It's whoever we sort of know in the moment.
It's whatever YouTube video and whatever like Reddit forum or Twitter echo chamber you just so happen to live in. That's what the fandom is telling you.
And I will say that, like, for example, like my mom likes Star Wars. If my mom were to just sit and watch this show, she's not invested in the canon. She doesn't remember all the nuances of all the character decisions. She doesn't have, watched all the Clone Wars to give the prequels more context. Like, she doesn't know. If she were to sit down and watch this, she'd be like, yeah, that's good. I can see people liking it. I can understand why someone would just watch it and like it. So, I think they're wrong, but I don't think they have the full context. If they had the full context, I think they'd hate it. But I could see someone just sitting there watching, like, oh look, it's Darth Vader doing things. Oh look, he's force choking people and he's snapping people's necks. Ain't that cool? Oh look, lightsabers fighting, clashing. Oh, that's cool, right? Continue, Ronan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, that first episode is pretty good. It's like, that's exactly what I would want to see Obi-Wan doing. He's so committed because he was the best of the Jedi Order at that time when it was still around. And it's like, in his dying days, he was like the golden shining light of that organization. Yoda is technically stronger, but Obi-Wan is just the best of all the Jedi. So, it's like to see him be so committed to, I'm going to protect this boy and I'm going to hide, to the point at which where he literally cuts ties to the Force. He doesn't have powers anymore, and he's just willing to watch people suffer and die in order to.
He lets a Jedi die.
Yeah,
a Jedi
he
actually comes to him for help, and he says no, and that Jedi ends up being hanged in the street.
Yeah, that was good shit. I was like, oh wow, this is some good stuff right here. So we have him at this dark place. We know ultimately he's going to turn over and go back to what he will be, because we've seen episode 1. We know what's going to happen. But now it's like, okay, interesting. Take me on a journey, TV show. Let me see this character's redemption arc. And then we get to that second episode, and that's when all the red flags start to pop up instantly. It just mainly in the form of Leia, who I think we've discussed plenty how that's just like this sounds like this would give Rachel probably like I'm like,
oh
god, here we go.
But she is like, they wrote Leia, like, you could tell that, like, Kid Leia is written by like a committee of white dudes trying to think of what like an empowered female character is. Like it's so generic and token and pandering, and it's like she doesn't even. I don't even see how this character becomes Carrie Fisher later on. That doesn't make sense to me, because she's just written so generic, and just like cookie cutter assembly line. But again, it just screams a bunch of dudes who are just trying to pander to, like, we're going to give strong female empowerment. And it's like, so every time this kid opens her mouth, it just drives me nuts.
See, I would slightly disagree with you there, at least in the early episodes, because I didn't have any problem with the way Princess Leia was portrayed or the little girl who was portraying her. But as it got, like, early on, because I'm like, okay, she's got that feisty spirit, that same thing that Princess Leia has in A New Hope and stuff like, okay, I get what they're doing here, I understand it. But in the later episodes, it seemed to really show itself as like, okay, this is just kind of like a one-note thing. She's barely even in the later episodes. And that's a problem with this whole show to begin with. Like, you get multiple Inquisitors at the very beginning of the show, and then they just disappear. You'd never see them again. You see Princess Leia a ton. She's like the main focus of the show for the first few episodes, and then she just kind of goes away, and then it kind of shifts to it's a Darth Vader, Reva, Obi-Wan show. It's weird. The tone is all over the place with this.
Yeah, I remember liking Princess Leia in the first episode. Like, she has like an annoying cousin that talks down to her, and she puts him in his place, and I thought it was great. By episode 2, she was just like annoying child protagonist, and I was already done with it by that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more kind of what I get at when I say she is like a character written by someone who is just trying to pander to somebody else. It's not like I can't hate on like the actress who plays her. I don't even know her name. She's probably when she's not reading slop, she's probably good. Like, yeah, I'm gonna give her that, because I have like you can't judge like this one character, the show for her. But like, yeah, just the way the character is portrayed is just awful, and she just keeps she does like typical standard issue kid things, like, oh, I'm going to like take puts them directly in trouble. Like, I'm just going to run up to this mole man's train thing, and we're just going to hop on in here. And it turns out that oh no, he's like an imperial sycophant. Oh
He
no,
likes the Empire.
nothing wrong with a little order, if you ask me.
Now that the voice of that thing was just awful. Star Wars runs this very fine line between when they have aliens speaking English, and then it can be really good sometimes, or it can be terrible. And that mole man, that just sounded so out of place. And I was watching a YouTube video. I think Christian Harloff was reviewing that episode, whatever, and he hated it. And he's like, "Can you imagine if Jabba the Hutt and Return of the Jedi was like, hey Jedi, how you doing?" I mean, it would be stupid. It's like, they're aliens. Why don't you just subtitle it? Give them a weird, their own language and just subtitle it. So that took me out of it.
I appreciate how
weird.
Some of the aliens are subtitled and some of them aren't. Because,
right. It's all about the voice and how it's done, I think.
Yeah, but he has such a wholesome, borderline, like Father Bear from the Bernstein Bears. Like, he kind of sounds like that's what I picture him sounding like.
Yes. Very, very odd.
So, did you want me to keep going? Or
yeah, I mean, this is your world. We're just living in it.
How is this if it was my world, we wouldn't have made this show. Because as I keep coming back, when we were doing Doctor Strange, and you were talking about how it's like, yeah, give me the animated X-Men in that show for 3 seconds, just because. Yeah, that's what I want. Like that's catering to stupid fandom. And that's what this show and Book of Boba Fett are. They don't serve a purpose to the overall narrative. These are popular characters, and we can make money off of putting them in a show.
Here's the thing, Ronan, and I'm gonna bounce away from Obi-Wan for a second to address that horrible comment you just made about the animated X-Men. That's not catering to fandom. The whole point of the Multiverse of Madness is to show that there are multiverses, and it would make total sense within the context of that film itself to show the animated world to be the 94 animated X-Men world. That makes total sense logically within the context of that film. It does not make sense what they do a lot of things in this show. If again, and maybe we can branch off after we discuss this train wreck garbage fire of a show into the idea of canon, because I know we had some discussion about that. Like, in my head, I have a whole different way that this show goes, and I'm just going to prefer to believe it happened that way rather than how it was actually shown to me by Lucasfilm. The end. So, continue.
Yeah. So let's see here.
This is a good spot for an edit, Matt. Just FYI, when you go to do some post-production.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, you got into didn't like how Princess Leia was portrayed in Episode 2. You said everything started going downhill in Episode 2.
Yeah. After that point in Episode 2, it's like everything starts to go downhill, and this is when Reva also starts to become like the worst fucking character imaginable. It's about Episode 2. I've never seen Rebels, but I understand that Rebels is where these Inquisitors are introduced. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and the Inquisitors, it's because Vader serves Palpatine, but the Inquisitors serve the Sith. Isn't that right? There's some weird dynamic.
The Inquisitors, basically Darth Vader is kind of like the head honcho of the Inquisitors. So there's basically the Emperor. Underneath him is Darth Vader. Underneath Darth Vader is the Grand Inquisitor, and then all of the other Inquisitors. Like, the literal moon that the Inquisitor's base is on is right next to Mustafar. So Vader kind of controls the Grand Inquisitors and sends them out to hunt down Jedi around the galaxy.
Okay, so all right, so they're the ones who go out and hunt the Jedi, okay? Because that's what it shows. But I also thought that was the thing that Vader was doing with the 501st Legion. I thought he was the one who was executing the Jedi. Or am I getting it confused with the old continuity?
Turns out
of
Vader's doing nothing.
Old continuity, yeah. They inserted the Inquisitors to sort of be the mechanism in which, at least in my opinion, we need to have more bad Sith running around that aren't quote unquote Darth Vader and stuff. They wanted, I think Lucasfilm wanted a reason to have more bad guys with lightsabers running around, and they're just henchmen of Darth Vader now.
Yeah. Well, okay. For the purpose of making toys, that makes sense. You can't just have only one guy with a red glow stick. You need lots of them. Who the fuck went all in? Who did this? Which one of you is doing this?
Oh, son of a bitch! I should have called you. I have a pair of twos.
Oh, okay.
I got scared away.
The 7-2 also. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the only hand I've won so far tonight.
I haven't really kept track with any of that.
I like your turquoise cargo shorts, Steve. Just saying,
I made this
like
character as obnoxious as possible.
Are we both wearing the same purple bowler hat?
We might be. The bowler hat is my thing.
God damn
so
it!
So you stole that from me.
Fair. I just saw that today. I was like, oh, purple bowler hat. I'll buy that for $1,000. And then I see you wearing it. So
I'd buy that for $1. So this is all getting edited out. See, this is the problem, is that here's the bizarre other spoiler thing is I didn't like it. This show was bad, but this show didn't enrage me bad. Probably because I just mentally accepted that Star Wars, is dead and gone. I think Matt only just now realized, oh shit. Star Wars is in trouble.
I'm getting worried. Here's the thing. I just played Fallen Order, and that is an awesome game with an awesome storyline, and every character in that game I loved. Okay? So, and Mandalorian, I love that. Both seasons of Mandalorian, fantastic. The 2 episodes of Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett, fantastic. There's all kinds of good Star Wars stuff that's being made right now. I feel like it's the legacy characters, anything with the legacy characters from the original trilogy, that they are completely botching and fucking up. And, in my opinion, they're just making every legacy character turn it like they're all stupid idiots. Everybody. Luke, the Emperor, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan, Boba Fett. Who else is left? Princess Leia. They're all stupid idiots now. And I don't understand why they're doing it.
I heard, this is a fan theory, but I heard this, years ago after Force Awakens came out. Once people, stopped being oh, this movie is the greatest movie ever, it was almost at the point when Rogue One was coming out, when people were starting to, when it became cool to bash on Force Awakens. Because it seems to be about a year. It takes a year before it's cool to bash on the last movie. But so once people started to bash Force Awakens, a theory started to come out that what they were doing was the reason why they had to create new characters and put the focus on them is because it's something in the contract that George Lucas he gets a cut of any of the original legacy characters. Anything with them in it, he gets a cut of it. So. So that is why they're trying to dumb down and make the original the legacy characters as dumb as possible, while creating these brand new characters that are better than the legacy ones in every way. And so far, the only one they've gotten that right with is the Mandalorian, because Din Djarin is a far superior Boba Fett than Boba Fett ever was, because he hasn't fallen into the mouth of a stationary worm yet.
Yet. Yet, that's the key word, yet.
Yeah. Won't let them decide that they're going to make a different Mandalorian character or something. But that's a theory that I heard a while ago, and I didn't really buy into it.
I don't know if I buy into that theory. I mean, Darth Vader sells toys.
Tinfoil hat.
Yeah, but at the same time, I agree. I didn't buy into it for that reason. But now it's okay, so everyone hates Luke now. Although I actually follow his logic in Last Jedi, because as I mentioned before, it's the prequel movies on the Clone Wars showed the Jedi were kind of awful, and they do need to go away. So when he was the Jedi Order, it needed they were arrogant and they needed to die off, and I'm not training any more Jedi.
So when he was out hiding on a planet, it should have been an excuse of him starting a new version of a quasi-Jedi thing that isn't the same as the old. Then it all
Luke
would have
should
made
have been
sense.
making things better, not just quitting.
Not quitting and not helping his friends and family who are being murdered.
But again, that's part of what I was getting at. Is so they actively go and make him worse. But Harrison Ford, it turns out, like Han Solo, just after everything with his son, just up and leaves. Just okay, yep, I'm going back to smuggling. Just runs away. They make except for Princess Leia, they make every one of the legacy characters dumber. Okay, and Chewbacca. Chewbacca doesn't get that treatment. But all the legacy characters just get the short end of the stick for the new characters. And this show also kind of this is the moment that makes me go, there might be something to this, because now they're going after Obi-Wan. As you mentioned, it's like Obi-Wan is now the reason for all the suffering in the Star Wars universe, because he doesn't kill Darth Vader when he has the chance to.
I disagree with this theory, because the main new character in this show is in no way set up to be better than anything. Like, she has a ridiculous motive and a ridiculous, air quotes, master plan. Nothing about this new character makes any sense. And so I can't say that this show was created to make Reva look awesome in comparison to everyone else, the legacy characters.
Well, that's where it goes down to that kind of committee thing. Is we're going to have this strong, independent woman character, and that way it's going to appeal to the new generation. I'm going by what's the most cynical corporate thing that a bunch of white dudes at a desk could possibly think of. Oh, we're going to take advantage of all this stuff, and but they don't know how to do it. I didn't say they were making good new characters. This is just the attempt, and the reason for this is they get to keep all this money, because anything they do with the old characters, Lucas gets a piece of. I don't know how true any of this is.
Ronan, are you hearing radio signals in your teeth or something that we need to know
No.
about?
But again, the logic there kind of makes sense, and
no,
again,
just
all the legacy characters just keep getting trashed.
You can just say that they have shitty writers and just cut everything out that you just said.
Because here's the thing, Ronan. Let's say they have to give George Lucas a cut, right? Let's say that they're still going to make more money making stuff with the legacy characters and making them super popular that people want to see more and more and more and more of. And even if they have to give them a cut, they're still going to make more. But now fewer and fewer people appear to be watching Star Wars. It's dropping. They're putting all this new stuff out. Other than The Mandalorian, people just seem to be like, this ain't good, and we don't like it. We don't really want to watch it. So I don't know if that tracks.
That's the thing. We don't I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong, but at the same time, it's we don't know that either. Disney's not releasing the viewership things on this. They did say that Boba Fett got more views than Mandalorian, but they didn't tell how much. We don't know how much this show is going to get
I think
views.
They announced at least the premiere of Obi-Wan was their most watched Disney Plus show ever. Now I don't know if the numbers dropped precipitously after that, but they did come out and say at least the premiere of Obi-Wan was the biggest thing they'd ever put out.
Yeah, they've taken the Netflix approach, and they're just not going to release these numbers at all. Keep that in house.
But you got to imagine if I don't know how many subscribers Disney Plus has right now. I think it's 150 million, maybe, or something like that. You've got to imagine there's going to be a large contingent of viewers who are at least going to start watching Obi-Wan. Now they might cut loose 3 episodes in, but I gotta imagine a lot of people who have Disney Plus would have at least checked out the first episode of Obi-Wan. That's a lot of people. 150 million people. Even if you said only a quarter of their subscribers watched the first episode, that's still millions of people that would have watched it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I haven't watched anything, so I have no clue how the greater Star Wars audience feels about Obi-Wan. I believe that the greater Star Wars fan base, by and large, was was upset about Boba Fett, but not so mad that they're going to cut ties with the franchise. So I have no clue how Obi-Wan is faring out there in the wilds.
I feel from what I've seen of the Star Wars, again, the circles that I sort of frequent and look at on the internet, I think the overall feeling is like it was, again, crushingly mediocre with a few high spots, like some cool fights, some really cool visuals, some cool things happen in it, but then an overall sense of that's the story we got. We've been waiting years. We've been asking for Obi Wan Kenobi for years, and this is what you guys come up with, this storyline. Thought it was awful.
Yeah.
We've still barely talked about the storyline.
Yeah,
well,
yes.
there's not much of a storyline to talk about, really, honestly, with it. It's like, okay, so once he gets that kid off of the planet, because there's a guy out there. There's a guy he finds here on a planet, and there's somebody there who is impersonating being a Jedi to smuggle people off-world, which that was actually a kind of neat concept. It's like, okay, at the very least, we're not creating yet another Jedi who didn't get killed in Order 66, that ever-growing list.
Yeah, there's a lot of them now. It just keeps growing.
Yeah, it kind of devalues like how decimating Order 66 was when you keep making new Jedi that just so happen to have squeaked away from it, and then
Revenge of the Sith looked like Order 66, was putting in work. Turns out that was not the case.
Yeah,
I understand, that when the Order goes down, a lot of Jedi would get away initially, and that's why you would have this force that goes out there and hunts them down. That makes sense to me. But the fact that they stay alive for so long does not make sense.
One thing that I don't understand is in the very first episode of this show, the Grand Inquisitor shows up with Reva and the other two Inquisitors, and Reva's making the argument hey, we got to find Obi Wan Kenobi. You would think that the Inquisitors, the Grand Inquisitor, all that, would be all about finding Obi Wan Kenobi, considering what you said earlier. He is the most powerful Jedi. He's the one that everyone looked up to as the best Jedi. But the Grand Inquisitor's we don't care. We're going after these scraps. Why would you focus on these sort of Jedi who are kind of meaningless and aren't doing anything, and not spend the last 10 years going after Obi Wan Kenobi when they established that Darth Vader's sole purpose for the past 10 years was to find Obi Wan Kenobi? And I didn't understand why Reva seems to get that, but none of the other Inquisitors care about Obi Wan Kenobi at all. That was
probably my biggest question. Was Vader playing the long game? Did he know at some point Reva was going to be able to draw out Kenobi when no one else could?
But he could have done that himself.
Vader very clearly wants to get Kenobi, but the people that answer to him aren't going after Kenobi. But Reva, the character with the stupidest reason for going after Kenobi, does.
It's strange.
One of the many, many things that make no sense in this show.
Yeah, and Anakin knows Bail Organa. He knows that he's friends with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And one of my biggest problems, I think, with the show was none of the Inquisitors needed to be in this at all. This whole show could have been Darth Vader going after Obi-Wan Kenobi. Show Darth Vader is the one putting all this. He's hunted Obi-Wan Kenobi for 10 years. He's finally figured it out. And, it's those characters. That's the story we care about, right? That's the story everyone wants to see. They want to see Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan Kenobi and how that relationship works. I want to see how, emotionally devastated Obi-Wan Kenobi is. The most we get in this show is he just kind of looks off camera, and he just has a sad look on his face. What does he have? Post-traumatic stress disorder? Is he does he have the shakes? Is he just freaking out? Does he have panic attacks, anxiety attacks? The moment Reva reveals that Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker, we never get explained how she knows this. Throughout the show that I remember, they never explain how she knows this.
Yeah, I was always under the impression that was only known to literally about 5 people in the Star Wars universe.
It's supposed to be a secret because they didn't want the Emperor and everything didn't want that out because that would have hurt the political climate, and would have turned against him in a certain way, because it's like, oh, you were lying the whole time. Because the Emperor's whole plan is, I'm hiding my scheme from everybody. I am ruling the entire galaxy because they believe this thing happened, that the Jedi turned against me, and they've invested all their power in me, so I'm going to create this grand empire, and that's how he's controlling everything. But if the secret gets out that Darth Vader, his sort of right-hand man, is actually Jedi Anakin Skywalker, and that the Emperor orchestrated all this, well, guess what? Now you got a big rebellion on your hands. You don't have just little ragtag groups of rebellions. You're going to have multiple systems throughout the galaxy saying, what the fuck? You lied this whole time? You are crazy? That was the whole point, that they're building the Death Star, so that the Emperor would have the ultimate power in the universe to keep everybody in line. That was how he was going to, enact his final plan to control the entire galaxy, regardless of what information came out. So none of that lines up with the actual story of Star Wars, and I just look at this and I'm like, none of this makes any sense to me. And I'm fine with telling a story like the Reva character. If you want to tell a story about the Reva character, in concept it's a good idea. Oh, a youngling that was there that witnessed the death. I get that. I kind of like the idea of somebody going to the dark side in order to try to get to a point where they can kill Darth Vader. That's an interesting idea, I think. But the execution of that idea was awful, because all along the way, none of the character decisions that Reva makes, or Darth Vader makes, or the Grand Inquisitor makes, or any of these characters make, they don't make any sense whatsoever. And so I can't be engaged in a show when I'm constantly questioning, why would they do that? This makes no sense. And we can talk about it later on when we talk about Darth Vader. Just lets Reva go. He stabs her. She doesn't die. He knows that she knows his secret identity. He knows that what happens when you don't kill somebody and leave them to just, I'll walk away from you and I'll assume you're going to die. I mean, it literally happened to him. He knows what happens. You go to the dark side, you come back with vengeance, you try to murder the person again. And there's in that moment, there's so many reasons I'm like, this is stupid. This character would never do this. Never do this, and yet I'm forced to accept that they do it in order to, I guess, move the story along, keep the character alive for other media, whatever it may be, and it's just a disservice to the original characters. Give me just a story that is Anakin versus Obi-Wan, and I'll be fine with that. I don't need all these other characters that are irrelevant to the story, that make stupid decisions that cause all these ripple effects that make the original characters, both Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, total idiots. That's my problem with it. It's not, the character Reva herself. It's just the writing of this character within the story they're trying to tell. It's the sort of the illogical leaps that they make at multiple points throughout this whole show, and I'm just like, okay. Here's a big example. At the end of Revenge of the Sith, I remember, and I might, sound corny and cheesy when I say this, but hey, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. It's very passionate to me. I really love this franchise. When I was in the theater watching Revenge of the Sith on opening night, and the big fight, the big battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan took place, to me, that had a lot of emotional weight behind it. I was completely invested. I knew exactly how it was going to play out. I know that Obi-Wan wins that fight, and I know that, Anakin's going to lose and he's going to turn into Darth Vader. I already know the ending. However, I'm completely invested in that fight, and it actually feels like there's emotional heft and weight behind it, and you're like, oh my god, this sucks. I mean, these are friends, and the friends are fighting friends, and, I don't want to see how this is going down, but I know it's going to go down that way. When Obi-Wan fights Darth Vader in this show, I didn't give a shit at all. There was no emotional heft in this fight. Sure, it looked awesome, I'm not going to deny it didn't look awesome when it wasn't cutting away for Reva chasing Luke Skywalker around for no reason at all. But the fight itself, the visuals look cool. It makes you feel like, oh, yeah, Darth Vader and Obi-Wan fighting. Yay, I want to see this. I want to see this. But there's no emotion to it. There was nothing there other than pretty visuals. And I think that's the biggest failing of this show. It didn't go into Obi-Wan's sort of inner mental state. It didn't go into Obi-Wan, like, really, you know, what were the ramifications of him when he sees that Jedi hung in the town square, and immediately he's just moved on. He doesn't care. There's no ramification to him for letting a Jedi die. You know, if I was writing a story like this and I'm trying to focus on Obi Wan Kenobi and what has happened, what do? He's cut himself off from the Force. There's no reason I shouldn't see Obi Wan Kenobi just break down in tears over what has gone on and what he has let happen, and then show the growth over multiple episodes as to how he gets back to that place where he can say, okay, I've got to take care of this problem. Not, hey, I'm going to escort Princess Leia around the galaxy and we're going to be introduced to all these other characters, because I'm not getting anything from Obi-Wan Kenobi there. I get a few close-up shots of him looking confused, and suddenly I'm supposed to care about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin. That's not what this show did, and it's disappointing to me. Steve.
Good night.
Steve, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I feel like I enjoyed it more than Boba Fett, but that's not saying much. It's another show that requires people to make the stupidest decisions in order to move the plot forward. Like, Vader is, aside from me thinking Reva's master's plan is ridiculous, Vader's terrible in this. Like, there are so many times where Vader could win.
Set up his first encounter with Obi-Wan, because that is ridiculous.
His first encounter with Obi-Wan. So there's actually a cool scene where Vader is told Obi-Wan is here on this planet. He's in the vicinity. We got the place locked down. He's here somewhere. Come find him. And so Vader, he just lands and starts walking through this town, just using the Force to, like, rip people out of their homes and just fucking kill them. Like, he is just on a rampage. And it's awesome. This is what I would expect Darth Vader to do.
Yeah. It's like a horror movie character.
Yeah.
He's even shot like one, low angles and everything.
He eventually finds Obi-Wan, who, has not kept up on his lightsaber skills or his Force training, and he is no match whatsoever for Darth Vader. And so Vader restrains him. Vader, he slashes open something that is flammable. And so he uses his lightsaber to start this big-ass fire, and he uses the Force to drag Obi-Wan through the fire and just burn the shit out of Obi-Wan. Not as bad as what happened to Anakin himself back in Episode 3, but, that's what they're going for. Anakin Vader is inflicting the same damage onto Obi-Wan that Obi-Wan did to him.
Yeah, that whole fight scene was Vader just if Vader wanted to kill him, he would have killed him instantly. That was Vader toying with him the whole time.
Yeah, and we understand why, because Vader actually says, this is only the beginning of what I'm going to do to you. So we know when we first see Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, he's not trying to murder him. He's just trying to get him so he can torture the shit out of him.
He wants to catch him and torture him and make him suffer. Anyways, he gets tired of Force dragging Obi-Wan through the fire. And so, this is important. Listen to these words that I'm about to say. He uses the Force to put out the fire, and then he tells the stormtroopers to, all right, go collect Obi-Wan, because it's torturing time. And then Obi-Wan's friend, who I think is her name Tala, is that it?
Yeah, Talia, something like that.
Yeah, Talia, whatever. Obi-Wan's partner in this show has a rifle, and she shoots the flammable material, and it restarts the fire. And now suddenly, Darth Vader is powerless. He sees the droid on the other side of the fire rescuing Obi-Wan, and he doesn't jump over the fire. He doesn't walk around. He doesn't send the stormtroopers.
He doesn't
over there.
put the fire out with the Force?
Yeah, he doesn't put the fire out with the Force, which is the thing that he did literally 10 seconds ago. This fire, because it was started by someone else, is apparently this insurmountable barrier that he cannot get past. And so he just lets Obi-Wan go. And I went to like Reddit after this to see like what are people saying about this, and there were so many people saying he wanted to let Obi-Wan go. He wanted to let Obi-Wan go because he's not done with Obi-Wan. No, he absolutely did not. He tells the stormtroopers to go collect Obi-Wan. These are people. There are fans that recognize this doesn't make any fucking sense, and they're like struggling.
They're apologizing for it. They're trying to come up with some reason.
It sounds like you just trying your best to come up with some excuse for why the show isn't bad or something.
No, Matt's not doing that. Matt agrees.
No, like in Star Wars in general. No, like for Star Wars in general. This is the one that broke him.
I'm pretty broken after this show.
So that's a good story. Like we basically that's what we talked about with the stupid super fire is only episode 3. So we haven't even talked about like the end yet. So episode 4, like the Obi-Wan's in recovery. Episode 5, Obi-Wan has gone to, is it the Path? It's basically like the Jedi Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
And these people are helping Jedi get new identities, basically just be safe from the Empire and the Inquisitors. And so Obi-Wan links up with these people. This sets up a
whole new thing of issues, too. Like, yes. So there's a whole network. So how many Jedi exactly did the Empire fuck up and not kill? And how many of them are still around come, like, like Force Awakens and shit?
Well, like A New Hope. That's the problem that it really brings, because it's like, were there just dozens and dozens and dozens of Jedi in the galaxy during the whole original trilogy?
It certainly looks like
and none of them were called upon. How did Obi-Wan not tell Luke about this underground Jedi railroad? Wouldn't Obi-Wan, who was there and saw this whole underground railroad, say, "Oh yeah, my buddy Quinlan is out there, Luke, and oh by the way, all these other Jedi that I knew about, that now they're all out there too. Why don't you go try to look for them? Why don't you use the Force to reach out to them?" Why wouldn't Obi-Wan suddenly say, "Oh, hey, Luke, meet my old master Qui-Gon as a Force ghost"? It's like, oh, God.
Maybe season 2 will be like Vader or someone killing all these Jedi. I don't know, but yeah, this show introduces a shitload of plot holes in The New Hope. But anyway,
I would like to mention, too, just throw out there, that we are 10 years out from Episode 3. And people still remember the Jedi. They still know what the Force is. So about like 8 or so years. So they have about 8 years for the whole universe to fucking forget what Jedi are and what the Force is. Because
that's a good point. That's a good point, because, the more you bump up against A New Hope timeline-wise, if you believe in canon and you're one of those people, it's like, at the beginning, Grand Moff Tarkin doesn't even believe Obi-Wan.
You are the last of that old religion, my friend.
Grand Moff Tarkin doesn't even have any idea that the Jedi are still around. So
Han Solo just thinks that it's like a hokey old story.
Yeah.
Doesn't believe it.
So, yeah, we're coming up with some definite problems.
So Obi-Wan Season 2 is going to be Part 1, gotta kill all the excess Jedi, and Part 2... like massive Empire propaganda campaign,
or just Jedi mind wipe the universe.
Well, in fairness, the problem about the galaxy still remembering Jedi, and that they only had about 18, 20-ish years for everyone forgotten. That's been an issue long before. That's been an issue since the prequels started. Like since the 90s, because the timeline didn't add up then. But he wanted to tell a prequel story, and he decided, when I say he, I mean Lucas, and he decided to have the Jedi, instead of being this small mystical faction that not many people know of, and they're small in number of space wizards, make them an integral part of intergalactic diplomacy and military, to the point at which where you could never just erase them from public view. in less than the span of a human lifetime. It would take forever for you to wipe the Jedi from everyone's mind.
Yeah, and I think what
So
happened...
this is an issue from the original prequel series, long before anything else came along.
Yeah, and I remember, I think I saw an interview with George Lucas way back in the day or something, and he was trying to model this concept off of the ancient Romans, when the ancient Romans were trying to wipe out all of Christianity, when they would have their sort of like, hey, we're just going to murder them all, we're going to feed them to the lions and stuff like that, and they were trying to get as many of them out. I guess in modern context might be like Jewish people and stuff like that, when people are trying to wipe them out, and it's like, hey, you know, what would happen if this succeeded? Would people just move on and forget these people ever existed, sort of thing? But yeah, you're right. The timeline we're bumping up against, it's not plausible anymore. No. I think maybe it's already stretching credulity to say 20 years-ish, and people would be forgetting. I mean, maybe you could make the argument there weren't very many Jedi. It's not like there was 100,000 Jedi running around or anything like that. Maybe they just weren't seen in public very often. Maybe they were basically stuck on Coruscant at the Jedi temples and stuff like that, and they were at, you know, on systems that didn't have tons of people, so the average person wouldn't see them. I don't know, but it's already starting credulity.
Yeah, I would have to say, like, none of that works, because in Episode 1, Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine, a planet that is not within the jurisdiction, a planet that is not within the jurisdiction of the Empire, like of the Galactic Republic,
yeah,
or whatever.
He knows about the laser swords.
He knows that the laser sword is the weapon of a Jedi, and this is in space that is not under their jurisdiction.
That's true. So that's true.
But like, so that this has long been a gripe of mine, even before this show came out. This is part of when I rail against the prequels. It's stuff like this that sticks in my craw. Because I've asked people before, and the only thing they've ever been able to come up with is, well, the Emperor must have used wicked space magic to wipe everyone's mind. I'm like, that can't work. No, it doesn't work.
Well, here's the thing. I think there's plenty of real
personal gripe.
But there's plenty of real-world examples, I think, that you could make happening in the world today, where extreme propaganda changes people's opinions of reality. So I don't know if it's necessarily a huge stretch to be like, okay, you know, the Empire uses a massive propaganda campaign to, you know, somehow get people to not think about the Jedi anymore. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it doesn't make sense.
Their first propaganda campaign is to make people believe that these benevolent guardians, which is what they were supposed to have been for, like, you know, the guardians of the old, like, the old Republic, like, so it's like this benevolent group. So their first propaganda thing is to say, oh no, they actually were the ones behind the Clone Wars, so they're the bad guys. So that's your first propaganda piece. Then your second propaganda piece is, what Clone War? What Jedi?
They didn't exist at all.
No, that's none of all. You're talking crazy. That's you're crazy. Like I said, that's been a personal gripe of mine for fucking years.
Fair. That's a fair gripe.
I didn't have any other spot to put it outside of this episode, so I've kind of derailed our talk for one of my rants. So,
that's fine. No, I mean, no, it's a valid.
You assholes are dead set on, like, not actually getting through a synopsis of the show. Do you want to talk about something else?
Continue, Steve. Please continue.
Episode 5, Obi Wan Kenobi hooks up with the Path, and then he has, like, one of his few, like, face-to-face conversation, or face-to-face-ish conversations with Reva. They're talking through, like, a big steel blast door, and she lays out her history. She was a youngling. You know, Vader tried and failed to kill her, which again is a theme. And Obi-Wan figures out at this point that Reva actually wants revenge on wants revenge on Vader and not him. And then Reva uses her lightsaber to open the door, which she could have done at any time. But I guess she just didn't think about that. So Obi-Wan surrenders himself. Obi-Wan surrenders because he knows that the Path is going to get destroyed. And so he goes outside, he kneels down, he's captured, and then Reva says, all right, I've got an army outside, we're waiting for Vader to show up. Why don't two of you stormtroopers take Obi-Wan to the side and just protect him in there, away from the army. Which I can argue, if we are to believe that at this point Obi-Wan made the offer for the two of them to work together. Like Obi-Wan says, use me to draw Vader here, and then you go and kill Vader. If we are to believe that at this point Reva has accepted that offer, then it makes sense to put Obi-Wan somewhere away from the army, because then Vader's going to have to go there. But at the time, who fucking knows what she's thinking, because the show is not clear whether or not she has accepted this offer. Anyways, Obi-Wan, escapes from, Reva's two best stormtroopers. And then Obi-Wan runs to a giant ship, a transport ship. I have no idea what's going on in this game. Apparently I'm all in. Obi-Wan goes to this transport ship, and it starts taking off, and Vader used the Force to drag the ship down. Then another ship behind it takes off, and Vader stands there and does nothing. You might recall from the fucking fire that he uses his powers once, and then he gets sleepy when he needs to use it again.
Oh, God.
Vader lets Obi-Wan escape again, despite the fact that we just saw him have the ability to stop Obi-Wan from escaping, and he just doesn't take. Anyways, at this point, Reva shows up and tries to attack Vader, and Vader's like, Vader just, basically like when he fought Obi-Wan for the first time, he's just toying with her. Like, he doesn't take Reva seriously as a challenger. He toys with her, tells her, I always knew you were that youngling. Like, I knew who you were this entire time. I don't care about you, you're nothing. Stabs her, and then walks away. Because, again, not killing people when you have the chance.
Also, the Grand Inquisitor shows up.
Yeah, the Grand Inquisitor. We haven't even mentioned the Grand Inquisitor. Now, the
because
Grand.
We forgot that she kills the figure quotes kills the Grand Inquisitor in Episode 2. We forgot to mention that.
Everyone in this show thinks that like a single stab from a lightsaber is a fatal wound that will instantly kill you. Which, to be fair, happened to fucking Qui-Gon in Episode 1. But apparently,
that was pretty fucking fatal to Qui-Gon.
Apparently, ever since Episode 1, characters have developed like an immunity to lightsaber stabbings. Like if you get cut in half, you're still fucked.
Like,
but
can't
if
you just stab somebody like
once?
Stop stabbing people in the stomach. Can you stab them in their heart or something? Or like just flick your wrist.
Fucking lung.
Yeah, flick your wrist up slightly after you stab them. Just cut through them like butter and let them die.
Do a little circular motion with your lightsaber to finish the job. But this is now the second time that Vader has failed to kill Reva, and as Matt pointed out, Vader has a history of killing people that know the secret of his identity, but yet he just leaves her there expecting her to die, and of course she doesn't, which leads us to Episode 6. Episode 6, Obi-Wan has decided, it's time to take the fight to Vader, so he leaves the transport ship, and Vader is in like a Star Destroyer, I guess, and he's chasing this little transport ship, and Obi-Wan takes off in another direction, and Vader says, follow Obi-Wan, and the Grand Inquisitor's like, no, like we have to go after the path, we can shut down the entire network, but Vader says, no, we're going after Obi-Wan, and so he does, which apparently means, like, there's not a single fucking TIE fighter or anything on this giant Star Destroyer that can keep up the chase on the Path spaceship?
This is also the last time the Inquisitor is seen in the show.
I'm sitting there thinking, like, wait a minute, why doesn't Vader's get in his little shuttle and fly over there while the Grand Inquisitor continues to chase him?
Are you telling me no one on this Star Destroyer?
TIE fighter.
Yeah, no one on this Star Destroyer
greatest pilot in the Republic.
More than 2 ships exist? Is that what I'm being led to believe here? Yes, that is what I'm being led to believe here. But Vader turns the entire fucking Star Destroyer towards where Obi-Wan's going, and then when Obi-Wan lands, then Vader takes his second ship down to the planet where Obi-Wan.
One small transport carrier carrying only him. No one else, just him.
I would have loved if them cut back to the Grand Inquisitor, like, on the ship, watching Vader fly away, just cussing up a storm. Like, what the fuck are we doing here?
So they go and fight, and at first, Vader beats Obi-Wan, and he buries him under a pile of rocks. You might have seen this coming. It does not ensure that Obi-Wan is dead. And
But
so
he did
Obi-Wan,
have the high ground, Steve. He
did.
had the high ground.
I was expecting a comment about that. Like, I was expecting a callback that didn't happen. But anyways, Obi-Wan is like using the Force to keep himself from being buried, and then he kind of just gets his groove back, and he blasts himself out of the hole and fights Vader.
Vader apparently did not hear Obi-Wan shoot all of those rocks, boulders out of there either. Because he keeps walking. He has no idea until he just realizes it a second before Obi-Wan swings at him.
He's got the helmet on. It's tough to hear sometimes.
That makes sense.
Maybe
His
got
suit is really
MP3 player
defective, you guys. It's really defective. It beeps
Anyways.
a lot.
They fight again, and this time Obi-Wan kicks his ass, and he basically, I didn't watch the most recent animated series, but I know there's a scene where Ahsoka sees Vader with part of his mass damage, and she calls him Annie and recognizes.
They do the same thing.
Yeah, they did the same bit. So Obi-Wan beats Vader, destroys part of his helmet, and he sees what's left of Anakin's face, and he calls out to him, Anakin, I'm sorry, and then Vader says, I'm still your enemy. What's crumbling in the background?
When Obi-Wan,
who's doing that?
I'm opening up a bag of Chex Mix.
God damn it! This fucking episode!
So Steve, what's important here is the dialogue, because this is how they explain in A New Hope why Obi-Wan Kenobi said, a young Jedi named Darth Vader betrayed and murdered your father, because Obi-Wan says, Anakin, I'm sorry for all of it, and then Darth Vader says, you didn't do this, I killed Anakin Skywalker. So it's basically Anakin saying, I am now Darth Vader, I was the one that killed Anakin Skywalker, not you. So then Obi-Wan at that point in time, which was actually a really good piece of acting by Ewan McGregor, it looked really good, it had a close-up of his face, he actually looked pained and suffered, and then he goes, then my friend is dead. So at that point in time, he knows that that's not Anakin Skywalker anymore, that's Darth Vader. That is Darth Vader. So what should he do, Steve?
He should kill Darth Vader because he recognizes that Anakin is gone.
Murder the fuck out of him.
What happens, Ronan?
He does the exact opposite.
He walks away.
I borderline expected him to come back with a med kit and here's a welding kit for your helmet, my old friend.
At every point in this show, the characters do the opposite of what would make sense, or the show writers wrote the opposite of what would make sense. Reva's character would make much more sense if she had no idea that she was working for the person that she actually hates. And later on, Obi-Wan says, "Hey, Vader is Anakin and Anakin is Vader, right?" And then that is what sends Reva, back to the light, or at least turns her against Vader. They didn't do that. At the end, this final fight, if Obi-Wan had said, I recognize that you're telling me that Anakin is dead, but no, I still sense good in you, so I'm going to let you live. That would make sense with what he does. The exact opposite happens. Obi-Wan recognizes that Vader is evil, Anakin is dead, this evil person will always be evil, and there's nothing he can do about it. And he walks away. Everything that happens from the end of season 1 of Obi-Wan to A New Hope is Obi-Wan's fault, because he just even if I'm to accept that it's not the Jedi way to just execute someone who's clearly been beaten, certainly the alternative isn't just let the bad guy go.
Obi-Wan literally is shown in this show drowning a bunch of stormtroopers. He literally drowns them. He kills stormtroopers by deflecting their blaster bolts back at them. Obi-Wan's killing bad guys left and right in this show, but the second biggest bad guy, who's literally in front of him, he walks away from. But if that were a stormtrooper who was trying to shoot him with a blaster, then he would have just deflected and killed the stormtrooper. So that doesn't even make sense to me. Thinking about this, and I mentioned this whole show is setting up Qui-Gon, right? Because in the first few episodes, Obi-Wan keeps calling out to Qui-Gon, Master, are you there? You never see him, you never hear him, you never do anything like that. They even in the recap before the first episode begins, they recap all the prequels, and they have Yoda in there saying, "Hey, I have training for you." So everyone knows Qui-Gon is coming. Okay, so we're all expecting, when is Qui-Gon going to show up? Thinking about this today, it would have been great, I think, to have Obi-Wan, when Vader says, "I killed Anakin. It wasn't you. I killed him." I want to see Obi-Wan say, "Fine," and go to kill him, and boom, that's when we get Qui-Gon to appear. Because Qui-Gon
we were going to get.
Qui-Gon is
That's
the
what
one
I thought
who
they
believes.
were building to.
Yeah, Qui-Gon is the one that believes that Anakin is the chosen one. It wasn't Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan didn't even want to train him. It was the dying wish of Qui-Gon for Obi-Wan to even train Anakin in the first place. So that would have been a great moment there, and I would have loved it if Vader can't see him. Vader could not see the Force Ghost of Qui-Gon. You could have just had Qui-Gon appear and Qui-Gon tell Obi-Wan, "There's still good in him. I still believe it." And you have that emotional moment with Obi-Wan sort of and Qui-Gon there, and that's what causes him to walk away, which makes sense for the greater trilogy, because Obi-Wan is waiting for someone to actually can redeem him, and Obi-Wan knows, his son Luke will be the one that ultimately redeems him and so he can bring balance to the Force to destroy the Emperor. That all would have made sense had they done it that way. But they didn't. They didn't do that at all. They just...
Apparently the takeaway that he got from that was like, you know what? I don't have to watch over Luke a day and night after all. You know what? I'm going to go out and move into the Dune Sea, or wherever it is he's going.
You know why they did that, Ronan? Because they're going to do another season with Ewan McGregor. They teed this up throughout the show, and by him going up to Owen saying, "I don't need to look over Luke anymore, that's your thing," that frees Obi-Wan up to go have adventures where we don't have to have this whole storyline of he's watching over Luke to make sure nothing happens to him and have to keep creating arbitrary reasons to get him off the planet. He can just tell Owen, "Oh, yeah, you can watch him now. I'm good." He tells Bail Organa, "If you need me, you know where to find me." That's a literal line in the last episode.
That is, but also, again, this goes back to, I haven't seen a lot of Rebels, but I have seen, because when I heard that Obi-Wan pops up in Rebels and him and Maul have the final fight, I was like, okay, I'm going to go onto YouTube and find this. This was years ago. Mm-hmm. And when that's happening, it's like you still get it's still pretty clear from that conversation that Obi-Wan is there. Maybe not necessarily protecting Luke day and night, but he's still there to protect Luke. So he hasn't given up on that, despite what it seems like the show ends with the idea of you know what, fuck it, let Luke do his own thing. This crazy war, it's gonna solve itself. I'm gonna go out and have adventures with the Sand People out, and I'm gonna go find Goro out there in the sand. Yes.
No, you're absolutely right. And that scene that Dave Filoni did in Rebels is awesome. It's awesome, and it has a lot of power and weight to it because, again, for the past 40 years, we've all believed that that's Obi-Wan's mission, to watch over Luke. And so for this to end with him even on good terms with Owen's like, "Oh, you want to come meet the boy?" Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wait a minute.
Wait.
At the beginning of A New Hope, Owen wants Luke to have nothing to do with Obi-Wan. Nothing at all. Says, stay away from this guy. What happens? Does something horrible happen between now and A New Hope that suddenly Owen and Obi-Wan are not on good
Obi-Wan
terms?
Season 2 happens.
Yeah, Season 2. Oh, God. It creates so many new problems. I don't know. I feel like the story that they told here, and I could buy that Princess Leia gets in danger and that's what pulls Obi-Wan out. I can buy into that. That would be a plausible reason why.
That's just about the only thing that could get him off that rock.
I can buy that, but I cannot buy all of this other nonsense that happened. I cannot buy anything with Reva's character whatsoever because it was written so poorly. One thing that I think would have been really easy for them just to show a connection between her, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, to actually show that, because we see Reva at the very beginning, the first scene of the show. There's a bunch of younglings, and she's there with them, and they all run off during Order 66. I would have loved for this show to have started before Order 66. Like, do it a week, 2 weeks, a month before events of Order 66. Reva's training with all of her Jedi friends. Give me some interaction with her and her friends.
Let Obi-Wan give her some kind of like important thing that sticks with her, but then she's like, "Oh no, where is he?" When that way, maybe you can understand why she hates him.
Well, I almost like the idea better that Obi-Wan might be sort of teaching the class of younglings something. Maybe it's a fight technique or something, and maybe Reva's going, against one of her friends.
Hold the high ground in all battles.
Well, yeah, she's going against one of her friends, and maybe her friend is beating her, and she just a little bit of dark side comes out. But it still causes her to lose the fight. And Obi-Wan tries to instruct her, what you're doing here is wrong, blah, blah, blah. Maybe Obi-Wan gets called off, he's got to leave. And Anakin is there because Anakin's the superstar. Every youngling knows Anakin. They all look up to Anakin. Maybe Anakin's there as well, and Anakin pulls her to the side and says, if you ever get into a lightsaber situation like this again, do this, this, this. Maybe teaches her a move or something like that. And then later on in life, somehow, when she's planning to go up against Darth Vader, that's how she realizes Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker. Maybe Darth Vader and her are training as part of the Inquisitor sort of stuff, and she recognizes the move that Anakin taught her when she was a youngling. That's how she puts the pieces together. I would have loved to see something like that. I would have loved to have seen a connection between all of these.
Yeah, hold on a second. It sounds like what you're talking about is maybe something akin to what's a character arc?
Character development.
Isn't that? That's it. But we can't have that in these Star Wars shows. That's just being crazy. You're crazy, Matt. That's just.
And I just don't understand because when we're introduced to Reva as an Inquisitor, she's just she's just crazed towards Obi-Wan, and so my initial after episode 1, like, why does she hate Obi-Wan so much? Like, what is the deal with her and Obi-Wan? It turns out she doesn't really have a deal with, like, she's not pissed off at Obi-Wan so much. I mean, she mentions, where were you? Well, he could have just been like, I was a general in the Clone Wars. I was off planet doing other shit.
I was killing General Grievous.
Yeah, I was killing bad guys. I mean, I wasn't there at the Jedi Temple to babysit all the younglings constantly. That wasn't my role, Reva. But they don't develop it like it should. Like, there's kernels of things in this show that, especially with Reva, that could have been done really, really well. And in my opinion, they didn't do any of them. And they just turned the Reva character kind of into an idiot, just like they did Darth Vader, just like they did Obi-Wan, just like they did just about every character in the show. They just made him look stupid at every single turn, and that was my main problem with it.
But I don't like how as the show ends and Reva's now, she's been redeemed because of course she is. That was fucking
we saw
obvious.
that coming a mile away. It's like she's going to turn good.
So if you're going to fantasy book some of the stuff, my fantasy booking for this would be that instead she's not redeemed. She doesn't kill Luke, but she stays a villain. So that way now we have this she doesn't go back to working with the Empire, but now she's in this Asajj Ventress kind of role, where she's just her own independent faction out there causing kind of like how Maul is. So that way you have this other mildly Force trained person out there doing things that can pop up in other adventures now. Instead, now she's just another redeemed, I don't want to say Jedi, but finger quote Jedi, that we have to wonder
Force
where the
user.
Fuck was she in episode 1.
Well, she's a Force user now, and this causes another whole can of worms, because not only did Vader let her live when she was evil, but now she's turned good, so presumably she's going to show up in other shows, other media, whether it's video games, comics, whatever. Are you trying to tell me that we now have a Force user, a very powerful Force user, by the way? It's not like she is a youngling that doesn't know anything. Very powerful in the Force. She knows Darth Vader's Anakin Skywalker. every single time she shows up in any media whatsoever going forward, I'm going to be like, why isn't she telling these people who Darth Vader is? And she can't tell anybody who Darth Vader is, because then it would make no sense, because then it would really screw up the canon, quote unquote, because then everybody would know. So it's like, I don't know, man. I just think that
clearly the reason why she can't is because everyone's forgotten who Jedi are and what they were.
Yeah, it's just, I cannot tell you how mad I was watching this show. Like, every episode I would just, other than that first episode, I was like, this is good. Like, okay, I agree with you, Ron. I was like, the first episode's solid. I like where this is going. And then every episode after that just got progressively worse and worse. And to me, I hate this far more than the Book of Boba Fett. And the reason why is because, at least with the Book of Boba Fett, yes, the Boba Fett character was doing stupid shit constantly, but the characters around him generally were not. You know, whether it was Mando showing up or, I'm blanking on her name. Who is his partner? Fennec Shand, yeah. Fennec Shand. She kept telling him, this is a stupid idea. Like, why are you doing this? And I was like, okay, they're trying to tell a new story. Boba Fett's turning a new leaf. I don't like it necessarily. They're not pulling it off, but I can understand it to a certain extent. And all the rest of the characters in the show are kind of telling him he's a total idiot. But in this show, you have all of the characters being total idiots at a point in their lives that they should not be this way. This isn't like Boba Fett. He came out of the Sarlacc pit. He's trying to now be a different person, and that is the storyline, him being a different person. This is established characters who would not be acting the way they are, and to me that is far more egregious than watching Boba Fett, you know, do stupid things I wouldn't expect him to do. But I'm like, okay, you know, he's at least attempting to try to be a different person, and they're explaining that to me. I would also say that I think far more of the Boba Fett episodes were actually just way better. So, for example, I think it was episode 2 of Boba Fett, right? That's the one with the sand people. That whole thing was awesome. Like, the attack on the train and stuff, I'm like, wow, that's just really cool. It was really good. Other episodes sucked, but then you had the 2 Mandalorian episodes that were really good. I feel like overall, the Book of Boba Fett as a show was more entertaining to me than this. So I can look at the finale of the Book of Boba Fett and be like, why isn't Boba Fett just calling the Slave One to shoot all these things? Why is he riding a Rancor
What is
around?
the Slave One you speak of? Yeah. I only know
it's his
I only know the fire starter.
Fire spray. I'm sorry, it's now called the fire spray. Why is
Slave
he not
One
doing
sounds problematic.
But I'm like, okay, I could just buy that more than I could buy the decision making in this dumpster fire of a show. Now, I mean, I don't know. If I had to give this a grade, if I'm rating this on Outpost Unknown, transmissions from the Outpost, I'm going to give this like a D+ show. I feel like this is on the level to me of like Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, that kind of stuff in terms of Star Wars content. I just hate. And I think it was even worse for me because I was playing Jedi Fallen Order at the same time I was watching this show, and then I see in that game 5, 6, 7 characters that I just love these characters. I'm like, this is how you write characters. There is a Inquisitor in Jedi Fallen Order. Her name is Trilla. You get her backstory. I mean, she's got far less screen time, you know, per se, than what Reva got in this show. And you know this Inquisitor's motivations. You know exactly why she became an Inquisitor. You understand the reason why she became an Inquisitor. It ties in with other characters that you've been following and really enjoying in the main story. It all comes back around. Yes, Darth Vader shows up in that as well, and he doesn't do stupid bullshit. He does exactly what you think you do. You failed me. Die. Sort of thing. And, you know, it was just so much better than what we got on this stupid trash Star Wars television show.
I didn't like it, but
What grade would you give it? If you had to give it a letter grade, what would you give it?
Maybe like a C minus.
Okay, so that's just one grade up, or 2 grades up from a D plus. How about you, Steve? What would you give this show?
C plus, D, or C minus, D plus, something like that. Like there were ways for everything in this show to make sense, and at every single opportunity, the writers did the opposite, and I don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, Boba Fett, like, the Book of Boba Fett was more kind of like, that's more fascinating in terms of, like, here you have a character who is literally a blank slate. This isn't even me trying to troll. He's just, like, he's literally a blank slate. There's almost nothing there in terms of, like, films, like, for this character's, like, motivation, his backstory, any of that. Like, very little. So you can finally create the Boba Fett that people have always wanted and have wrote in their head. You can give them that, and they don't do it. That's the thing about Boba Fett. That's like where you can go. Like the best way to fix that show is to not make it. For Obi-Wan, it's like exactly what Steve said. There are things you can do to fix this show, and have it not suck. But it's more cutouts than additions with this show.
We haven't talked about the dumbest character yet.
What's that? What's the dumbest character?
Bail Organa.
Oh.
Who knows that the fucking Empire is trying to find Kenobi, and he knows that his daughter, Princess Leia, is out there and has been kidnapped.
Well, he knows Princess Leia is Darth Vader's daughter, and Luke is Darth Vader's son.
And he sends a message to Obi-Wan basically saying, hey, Obi-Wan, just in case you're dead, I'm going to go to Tatooine, and I'm going to find a kid named Luke who is super, super important, and we can't let the Empire have him. Again, just in case you're dead, this is my location, this is where I am going, this is who I am trying to find.
Yeah. And then that sort of hollow tape just happens to fall on the ground from the Kumail Nanjiani character, the one that was like the pretend Jedi. He just happens to drop it, and it just happens to be right where Reva is left to die by Darth Vader and the Grand Inquisitor. And she finds it, and she's like, oh, okay. So in that moment, did she realize Luke Skywalker is Darth Vader's kid? Because she would have had to, right? Because otherwise, what is the point of going after him?
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly the implication, but I don't know how. I maybe I need to go back and watch it again, but I don't think...
Don't do that.
I don't think Bail Organa, says that in the holotape. He's just like, hey, I'm going to find this really important kid. And Reva's like, well, he must be important for some reason. I'm going to kill him.
Well, does she just think he's important to Obi-Wan? Is she still pissed off at Obi-Wan at that point in time? Again, it's terrible writing.
Obi-Wan's not the one who just completely played her in battle like she was a fucking chump. And then stabbed her. That was Vader.
I know. That's why I was so confused. And it's and that's the other thing, right? So we finally get, in the final episode, we get fairly early on in the episode, honestly, is the battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. That's what everybody's been waiting to see. We're all excited to see it. And it keeps cutting away in the middle of the fight to watch Reva being, I guess, she's going after Luke. We get Owen and Beru with blasters trying to kill her. Reva is still evil at this point. Reva's still evil at this point. She's chopping off the arms of people in episode 1. She doesn't kill Owen and Beru because she can't. So it's still, again, it's out of character for her. She would literally kill these people.
Well, no, she's still, at this point, she still has a lightsaber stab wound. So she's weakened. I was fine with that.
No, I am not fine with that. Come on now. She could
I'm
just
okay
force
with
choke them to death immediately.
No, that's like when Kylo Ren was fighting Rey at the end of Force Awakens, and he gets beat up. He gets beat up by this person who's never picked up a lightsaber before, but he's also just gotten hacked up a bit by Finn and got shot by a Wookiee bowcaster. He's clearly not 100%. She just got fucking toyed with death by Vader and then stabbed. And then decides to
she was
I'm
clearly in
this.
pain and struggling during
Well, yeah,
those
she's
scenes,
in pain.
so-
What I'm saying is she is an Inquisitor and could have immediately killed them both. I mean, come on now. She's swinging her
100%.
lightsaber
Darth
right in
Vader
Owen's
got
face.
sleepy after putting a fire out. We don't know what kind of damage a lightsaber to the gut does to a person.
Yeah.
Unless you're Qui-Gon, then it kills you.
Well,
Yes.
so it's cutting to this, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, there's no emotional impact in any of this. Why do I care that Reva's going after Luke Skywalker? I know exactly how this is going to play out. She can't do anything to Luke Skywalker. And they have to do this stupid thing where I guess Luke was passed out the whole time and just happened to not see her glowy lightsaber at any point when she's wrecking shop in their little moisture farm. I guess she uses the Force and knocks him out basically, and that's how they're going to explain Luke has no recollection, because in A New Hope he doesn't even know what the Force is, and we're showing like an actual Inquisitor basically fighting Owen and Beru, and I'm like, come on, this is way too much. And I'm like, I know what's going to happen at the end of this. She's going to turn good. This is how it's going to play out. And of course, it was telegraphed. The whole thing was telegraphed. Every time it went to Reva and Luke running, because we don't see Luke really until, maybe like for 30 seconds. And now I'm supposed to care that she's chasing him around. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I want to watch Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fighting. I don't give a shit about the side story here that's irrelevant and meaningless to anything at all. And then she brings Luke back, and then she's like, "Oh, am I turning into him?" It's like, well, yeah, your whole plot. He should have said what you said, Steve. Obi-Wan should have said, well, yes, your entire plot was to murder Jedi, and that's exactly what Anakin did, was murder Jedi. So yes, you actually are him. Congratulations.
You've been him for
now
a
kill
long
yourself
time.
with your lightsaber or something. It's like, I don't know.
Now do us all a favor. Go out into the desert, bury your lightsaber in the sand, and then bury yourself with it, you fucking twat.
Well, cut that out. But then I'm like, well, wait a minute. Obi-Wan does another stupid thing. Again, he just believes that she's reformed now. It's like, well, wait a minute. What if she changes in a month and realizes, wait a minute, because the dark side, guys, remember? It's very easy to fall into. That's the whole point of the dark side. That's what we've been taught from every piece of Star Wars ever. The Jedi try to keep the dark side at bay, and it's a struggle because it's very easy to succumb to the call of power and greed and all of that stuff. And yet, Reva, who has been evil for, I guess, at least a decade, murdering people, working for Darth Vader, doing all kinds of horrible things, decides, I guess I can't kill a little kid, now I'm better. And Obi-Wan says, yep, go ahead and do your own path now. No justice. No, that's the thing with all Star Wars. It's not just Reva. It's with everybody. Well, I guess if I think about it, Kylo Ren turned, but then he died. Darth Vader turns, and then he died. So is Reva an example of someone who's done awful, awful, horrible things? Is she the first character in Star Wars that's done like Sith sort of stuff, has done terrible, terrible things, and there's no punishment at all? Obi-Wan just lets her go, like, you're not going to arrest her, you're not going to turn her in or anything like that? Because I can't think of anybody else. I guess you could go like Boba Fett or something. Like, did Boba Fett, he's never been arrested for all the bad things he did, I suppose, but I'm thinking of all the other Sith that have turned, or the bad guys that have turned. They always, even if they turn, they die at the end. It's not... Well, you get to live your life all happy.
I watched through like the Clone Wars like once. I haven't gone back and rewatched through that show, but there's something I like in terms of like, is there someone? What your question? What happens to Asajj Ventress? Because I'm not. Off the top of my head, I can't remember an episode where and then she gets her death scene. Where is she at?
She dies. I know she dies. I'm trying to remember who killed her. Somebody kills her because she eventually leaves the dark side. Like, she's not Dooku's kind of apprentice anymore. God, now I'm gonna have to look it up. Let me look that up. Table that. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll find out what happened to Asajj Ventress.
So bowler hats, huh?
I think we're done talking about Obi-Wan. It sucked. It was bad. Like, what it got me thinking about was this whole concept of doing all these terrible things, and then getting redeemed at the end. And in the case of Vader, you go to Force Heaven. But so what I was thinking about was, in the original trilogy, what evil things did we actually see Vader do? Like he
does
cuts
nothing.
off Luke's hand.
He only kills actual Imperials. He force chokes some Imperials. That's it.
He kills some other bad guys. He cuts off Luke's hand, and he has Han Solo tortured, and then he gets redeemed.
He tortures Princess Leia too.
He tortures her.
But still, he has a very small list of crimes that we are exposed to that makes his redemption make more sense.
Is he can we tie him kind of directly, indirectly into the planet Alderaan being destroyed?
Tarkin does that.
Tarkin is the one that does that.
100% does that.
But he's there by proxy.
No. I'm talking about things that Vader himself does. He does very few actual evil things in the original trilogy, which makes his redemption and a Force Ghost going to Force Heaven make more sense. I feel like I'm starting to see all of the prequel stuff, all the movies, all the games, all the animated series as a net negative in relation to the original trilogy, because the more I see, the less willing I am to accept that Vader is got this easy redemption at the end.
Well, it's not. Here's probably what Star Wars fans would tell you. It's not Vader who gets redeemed. It's Anakin, Steve. Anakin got to go to Star Wars heaven, not Vader. Vader's gone now.
Yeah, Anakin comes back apparently. That's the thing. There's still good in him. Darth Vader is Star Wars treats Darth Vader as completely separate from Anakin Skywalker. And
so a split? Are we talking these two people, these two beings should be considered split personalities?
Kinda, because how Star Wars sort of looks at it is, for example, in the prequels, it's not Anakin that kills all the younglings. It's Darth Vader, because the Emperor has decreed, you are now, from this point henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader. Then Vader shows up at the Jedi Temple and murders, because he's gone full dark side at that point in time. So it's almost like the one that's redeemed at the end of Return of the Jedi is Anakin sort of comes back. It's no longer Darth Vader in that moment. Anakin sort of regains control and tosses the Emperor into the reactor, and that's how the Force Ghost thing makes sense.
Oh God, that's even stupider.
Now I will point out real quick before I forget,
voice that I was being mocking.
Before I forget, Ronan. So to answer your question, Dooku kills Asajj Ventress because Asajj Ventress kind of left the dark side, and she fell in love with Quinlan Vos, who's actually Obi Wan Kenobi's friend, and Dooku goes to kill Quinlan Vos, and Asajj jumps in front of the Force lightning, and that's how she dies. So again, a bad character has done terrible, terrible things. The quote-unquote justice, if you want to call it that, for sort of turning good and being doing a sacrificial thing is you die. I don't know I'd have to think about it. Is there another character in modern sort of live action or sort of cartoon continuity in which a very evil character is just allowed to walk away without the quote-unquote punishment being death? You do all these terrible things.
Have Reva go talk to the farmer whose hand she cut off and ask that one-handed farmer if they forgive Reva.
Yeah, she's got to do a 12-step program to atone for all of the stuff that she's done.
That's going to be in season 2. She's going to that farm. You're going to see that farmer. She's going to have the robot hand and being working on her farm or whatever, or in her bar, whatever it is going to be Reva. Like that's season 2. I just gave the writers a free one. There you go. Have at it.
See, I agree and disagree with your point, Steve, in terms of like all the original prequel trilogy just kind of ruined, a lot of the stuff with the original trilogy. I still think, and I know I'm probably the minority here and on this show in particular, I still think there's a lot of good stuff in the prequels. The execution is bad. I think the story.
Enjoy the prequels for the most part.
I'm in the minority on this show. I'm the one who believes that point Steve just made. The prequels actively go out of their way to make everything worse. They're the root of all evil.
I don't think they're the root of all evil, because I think the prequels, it's the first 6 episodes of Star Wars are arguably it's just the fall and redemption of Anakin Skywalker. That's the story, right? That's the story that they're telling. And if that's the story George Lucas is telling, then it works. I think the overall sort of arc of Anakin Skywalker, where, he's a Jedi, he does not want his wife to die in childbirth, and he's trying to find a way. There's a good reason as to why he starts going into the dark side. It overtakes him, because that's what the dark side does. That's what we are established. He's manipulated by the Emperor. It's like a tragic thing, and it works. Yeah, it's true.
The Emperor lies to him.
What about episode 2, where he goes and kills all the Tusken Raider women and children? He did that as Anakin.
He did. He did do that as Anakin. Yes, you're absolutely right.
The Force just... wow, the Force is racist. It doesn't see the Tusken Raiders as people.
They don't have souls, Steve. We all know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a point. He did a lot of bad. I mean, he just decapitates Count Dooku as Anakin as well. Like, he doesn't, because he even struggles with it, right? Because the Emperor tells him, like, kill him. He's too powerful to live. You got to kill this guy right away. And Anakin doesn't want to do it. And Obi-Wan's knocked out at that point in time. If Obi-Wan was there, he'd be like, absolutely not. We're not going to, decapitate him. He doesn't want to do it, but again, it's that manipulation, like that worm tongue that the Emperor is doing to just slowly turn him more and more to the dark side. And he is enraged at the Sand People because they murdered his mom. And he lets loose. So... I'm not trying to argue whether or not he should have been gone to the light side of the Force or what. I'm just saying I think that's the reason as to why.
And that's fine, but the prequel, and I Revenge of the Sith is a super fun movie. I will even say that the Attack of the Clones or Clone Wars or whatever the fuck it's called, there's even merit there, but still it makes Vader's redemption less believable. It's we went from seeing Vader do a tiny amount of evil things, and so then you see him get redeemed and it's fine, to seeing Vader do a shitload of things. And even if you want to say that Vader and Anakin are distinct, Anakin himself still got away with a bunch of shit.
What would you say with regards to Knights of the Old Republic? Revan, for example. Revan was, a great Jedi, then he goes to the dark side, does all this awful stuff, then gets sort of amnesia, forgets he is what he is. I mean, that's not canon, technically, but maybe that's an example of somebody who just...
They're remaking Knights of the Old Republic, so it might go back into the canon now.
It could.
I thought the Jedi found Revan's body and then mind fucked him into being the player character.
No. Yeah, he didn't get amnesia yet. The Jedi did that to him because in the second game you get to waste those Jedi for doing that to him.
I can buy that the player character in Knights of the Old Republic is distinct from Revan much more than I can buy that I should be treating Anakin and Vader as distinct people.
Yeah. And with Revan, because his story goes on past Knights of the Old Republic when they they do that MMO game, the Old Republic or whatever. I'm not sure what it's called. It was the one that was a massive online game. Revan pops up in that, and it's kind of convoluted, and I can't. I've seen the videos and stuff explaining his character because I actually liked his character, so I wanted to know what happens to him afterwards. Where does he go? So the details are kind of fuzzy to me, but long story short, because of the fact that he is unique in Jedi and like basically in Force user history, he's the only one who mastered both elements. Like it became the Avatar, as it were. He knew he was the master of the dark side at one point and was a master of the light side. No other Jedi ever did that. And so then he goes off into like deep evil space and gets captured by some super evil Force like Sith user who starts draining his like Force magic or whatever, and eventually literally splits his personality, his mind and body into two entities, Revan and his original light side. So that's what happens to him. He literally gets his personality torn in two. So the good part and the bad part.
Well, Vader didn't do that, so it's stupid.
Yeah.
I mean,
that doesn't happen to anybody else. It only happens to him.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about. I suppose.
All this prequel shit is making me really re-examine my love for Star Wars, and I think I'm starting to love it less.
Welcome to my world. That's why I've been so angry for years at Star Wars. Because all this shit goes and it makes the original trilogy that much dumber. It worked as its own. It worked as its own self-contained story, and then because I even not in reference to Star Wars, Steve has said for a long time that he is against prequels because prequels always make the thing that they come before worse.
Yeah,
the
story should always be moving forward.
The only good example I can think of a prequel that doesn't introduce plot holes and fuck up what it's coming before is fucking Spartacus. It's like the prequel show for that does not fuck up anything that happens beforehand. That's the only one I can think of.
We should do a Spartacus show, guys. Now I want to watch Spartacus.
I actually looked this up one time, and unfortunately, Spartacast is already taken.
Damn. I mean, it's so obvious to Spartacast. Okay, well, that, ladies and gentlemen, was our discussion on the Obi Wan show. Now, I will, before we wrap this up, what I do find is sort of interesting, and I think one of you might have mentioned this when we were talking about Boba Fett. I'll just describe it to you guys because I think it's a valid point. All of the Star Wars media, the content that's been coming out recently, Star Wars fans seem to like it when it has nothing to do with like the legacy characters. And the only real exception I can see to that is when they had Luke show up at the very last episode of Season 2 of Mandalorian. I think that was just universally loved. But just in general, like all the new characters on Mandalorian, all the characters in like Fallen Order, I think that maybe they just need to get away from the legacy characters. Like, just don't touch them anymore. Just do all this other stuff
for their own safety.
Yeah, I mean, it's
for the protection of the legacy characters. Leave them alone.
Please don't give us a Chewbacca origin story. I know he's like 500 years old, or however old he is. I don't need to see baby Chewbacca.
Yeah, I think that the legacy characters, they're just fucking up more than they're helping. I mean, I don't think they've helped any of the legacy characters, honestly. No. Anything.
I don't know if it was me who referenced the point, but I said something along the lines of the reason why the Mandalorian works is because the Mandalorian goes out of its fucking way to have nothing to do with the original story. Any of the stories, the prequel stories, the original trilogy story, it goes out of its way to be its own self-contained thing that works on its own without any Star Wars knowledge, and that's why the Mandalorian works.
Yeah. I think Taika Waititi came out and said that his Star Wars movie that he's doing has no connections to anything. He's doing like a brand new weird thing that only Taika Waititi could probably come up with, and I'm excited to see that. But the next show, guys, the next show coming out is Andor. So let's touch quickly on Andor and our question.
I am not watching that.
Good fucking luck. Nope.
Okay, so why are you guys not interested in Andor?
Who would be? I liked Rogue One, but it was a one-off, and it was fine as a one-off. There was not a single character in Rogue One that I was like, yeah, I want to know more about them. They showed up, they did their job in their movie, and then they fucking died, and that was all that I needed from them. I don't need to see any more from any of those characters. I definitely don't need to see 24 fucking episodes worth of new things about those characters.
That's what's most intriguing to me about this Andor show is with Obi-Wan, they only gave it 6 episodes, and most of the episodes were less than 40 minutes, I feel. Like, I think the episode 3 or something was only like 30 minutes long.
They just made a movie and chopped it up.
Wait, Steve wasn't being an asshole? It's really 26 episodes?
No, it's 24.
Holy fuck!
They shot season 1. Season 1's already done, and Lucasfilm greenlit 12 episodes, because it's like an Academy Award-winning writer that's doing this thing. I think it's is it Tony Gilroy? I don't remember who's writing it. But they did 12 episodes. They committed to 12 episodes of this thing. And then they said, we're giving you a season 2, another 12 episodes. And I guess the latest Star Wars Celebration, Tony Gilroy came out and was like, the final episode, the 24th episode of Andor, leads directly right into Rogue One, so it's like it connects right to Rogue One. So it's
that sounds terrible.
I don't know, but I mean, it doesn't sound good to me. But I'm wondering if that's where the best Star Wars content will be. We have no expectations for that. We're almost every single character other than Andor is going to be a new character, a different character we're not used to. We don't really know what the storyline of this is going to be. Maybe this is the best thing to sort of go into with no expectations and no legacy characters that you really have to worry about, and just sort of see, 24 episodes. They wouldn't even give Obi-Wan that, so they must really think this show is fantastic. That's crazy, 24 episodes.
That sounds terrible. It sounds like a vision of pure hell.
So I got a question for Matt.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So you have told me in the past, because we've talked about this before, I don't remember if we talked about it on the show or not, but you have told me in the past that you cannot imagine a day where no matter how bad Star Wars has gotten, that you still wouldn't be excited to watch the next Star Wars thing. You seem like incredibly disappointed in Obi-Wan. Has this changed your stance at all?
No. And I'll tell you why. Because there's still positive things that I can hold on to on the horizon. You know, Dave Filoni's doing Ahsoka. That's coming out next year. I'm like, in Dave Filoni, I generally trust. I blame Jon Favreau for Book of Boba Fett, not Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni's episode of Book of Boba Fett was fucking great. So I believe in Dave Filoni, and that's going to be like a live-action version of Rebels, and those are characters he knows and loves that I love. I know he's not going to fuck that up. Andor, I will say, I'm not super excited for it, but I'm genuinely intrigued. I'm like, what could they possibly be trying to tell here? Like, what story? If they tell me a really good story, and I'm like, okay, I'm into this, I'm good. They're doing a show called The Acolyte, which takes place before all of this era, back in the High Republic, and it's supposed to focus on the dark side, like the Sith. I'm excited for that. Ultimately, the thing about it is, you know, I don't get super disappointed with what could be coming with Star Wars, because I'm always finding new stuff that's good. Like no matter how disappointed I was in Obi-Wan, Fallen Order was awesome. Like, that was awesome. Like, I cannot wait to play the next Fallen Survivor, I think is what it's called. I can't wait to play that, because I loved all of the characters in that. I love the storyline with it. I just want to see more of that content. So it's not like every single Star Wars piece of content media is just a train wreck that's got me to the point of, oh my god, it's terrible. It's, okay, this sucked, I'm super, super disappointed, but the next writer who's making a show could be awesome. We could get, the next season of Mandalorian's coming out. You know, we're all excited about that because Mandalorian's awesome. So there's always going to be more stuff that I'm going to be excited for. It's just this brought me down to the depths. This was like a gut punch. I haven't had a gut punch in my love of Star Wars this much since Rise of Skywalker. Honestly, so
I thought you would have said Last Jedi.
Well, Last Jedi was before Rise of Skywalker, so it was basically like my most recent traumatic experience.
So you got 2 gut punches in a row.
Back to back. Well,
back-to-back gut punches. But here's like with the sequel trilogy, the thing that really sucks about that is I like the character of Rey. I like the character of Poe. I like Finn. I like all of these characters quite a bit. They just fuck the legacy characters. That was my overriding problem with
Except Leia. They like Leia.
They didn't just fuck the legacy characters. In the second movie, they then go on to fuck most of the new characters that we like. They then go on to fuck Poe and Finn.
That's true.
But it's instigated by the screw-up of the legacy characters. That's how it all rolls into place. So, if they hadn't fucked up Luke Skywalker, we would not have had the Rise of Skywalker movie that we did. We would have had something completely different, which would have been a lot better. Anything would have been better than what the hell we got in the Rise of Skywalker. So, overall, no, I still am passionate. I still love Star Wars. It's still sort of my favorite kind of nerd geek property. I'll always love it. But yeah, I'm not going to lie. This was a real gut punch. Like, I was really mad when I was watching these episodes. It would just end and my head was shaking. Like, Alyssa would look over me and I'm just shaking my head when the credits roll because I'm like, none of these characters would do this. Just honor, like, you can tell a story with the legacy characters that I disagree with. You can do that. I have no problem with that. I just have a problem when you are writing the characters in such a way that they would not actually do that. That is not their character. And you're writing them intentionally out of character in order to, I guess, move whatever story you're trying to tell along. And it's like, you can give me a story I don't care for, but just make sure the characters, keep them what they actually are. Keep the core of the character there. And they're not doing that. And I don't know if there's any more legacy characters left to fuck up, honestly. I mean,
I don't
who's
think
left?
Outside of Chewbacca.
I mean, they're talking about a Lando show. I mean, they kind of talk about a Lando show. I don't know if they'll do it.
Young Yoda?
They're going to do a Yoda show. Yeah, they're going to have
there we
Yoda.
go.
No, here's the thing.
And go fuck around with things for a while.
I guarantee you, in the Acolyte takes place in the High Republic, who's going to be there? Yoda, because Yoda is 900 years old, and Yoda would be alive at the time that Star Wars show takes place, and it would be younger Yoda. I guarantee you're going to put him in there because they're going to feel like they have to keep a legacy character in the shows to keep people interested.
I would be fine with that because basically, at 1,000 years in the past or whatever, nothing that would happen in that show could like reasonably have any sort of impact on the rest of the series. So the Acolyte, do whatever the fuck you want with it. I'm not gonna sweat it if the Acolyte sucks, but like this show, like so close to the movies that people actually care about, being this fucking stupid bothers me.
Yeah, it bothers me too. And it's just like, and people could be like, well, why does it bother you? Like, who cares, right? There's so many people who just watch it and just, they enjoy it for what it is, right? They don't care. Like I said, my mom's not going to give a shit about canon. She's not going to care about, Anakin Skywalker, would he make this decision? She's just going to be like, oh, cool, Darth Vader choking people and Darth Vader breaking necks and lightsabers, and that's just generally entertaining. But when you have sort of like when you're very passionate about something and you want it to be as good as it can possibly be, and you watch it, it's like, Steve, you love the Transformers, right? How did you feel when you're watching these Michael Bay Transformers movies? I'm sure you're like, this
awful.
Could be done.
They're fucking terrible.
Yeah, but you have a passion for Transformers, and you're probably like, these could be done so much better. Why can't we demand that they're done better? Why do we have to settle for this garbage that ruins like the storytelling aspect of it just because most people won't care? That's what we're gonna go by. Like, oh well, most people won't care about it, so who the fuck cares? And that was kind of like when we were having the conversation about canon in the chat room, and when I'm talking about canon as to whether it matters anymore, it's like, I just don't I'm getting to the point now where so many things are being fucked up, and there's so much. There's only going to be more Star Wars content that takes place in this time period, and there's only going to be more things that keep getting messed up timeline-wise, and things that don't make sense. It's like, I don't even know if I can sort of be beholden to it anymore. It's like, if I use the example that we've used in the past, Aliens, Colonial Marines. Like, Fox says this is the direct sequel to Aliens. This is what really happened. We played it. It's garbage. We disagree with everything that happened in that. We're just like, fuck it. No, we're not even going to consider that canon. We're just not going to consider. I don't care, Fox, that you told me it's canon. We're not going to consider it canon. It's just... I feel like that way with this show.
The problem with using Colonial Marines is that, or I'll pick something that's a little closer to my heart that was also listed as canon, and Steve will probably figure out what I'm about to say. Is the Ghostbuster game, like Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis back when he was alive, Ivan Reitman, because he had a part in that game too. All three of them said this is Ghostbusters 3. This is the sequel. This is what you're going to get, because at the time they never thought they were going to get to do a sequel. Fast forward to last year.
Bill Murray.
Yeah. Fast forward to last year, and what do we know? We get a Ghostbusters 3 that, of course, makes no fucking mention whatsoever of that video game, and actively goes to show that video game didn't happen. Aliens, Colonial Marines. That's kind of like that. That's promotional speak when Fox is saying this is the canonical sequel. Because while they were doing that, at the time they were still trying to make that Neil Blomkamp. Is that how you pronounce Neil? The guy who did District 9, Neil Blomkamp or something like that.
Yep.
He was like, they were working on a direct sequel to Aliens with him at that time. That wasn't going to get tied into that game, and it was like, so that's corporate speak. That goes into my thing.
But I think it's all corporate speak.
Well, my thing with canon is if it doesn't happen in a movie, it doesn't count. Because, like, the movies are the things that, 98% of all people are going to watch. Like, the 2% of us who are nerds, we're going to be the ones who obsess over
I mean, look at how many Terminator movies there are, Ronan. We all love the Terminator franchise. Look how many Terminator movies there are, and how many times they keep retconning everything.
No, I love 2 Terminator movies. I'm
just talking about the property. I'm talking about the property. I'm just saying, but those are movies. They're all released by the same studio. They keep retconning
movies.
They keep retconning everything.
I don't think they're retconning it. I think they're doing the whole multiple timeline thing that everything else is doing right now.
My understanding is that's what they're doing, but I don't follow them because they look like shit. And so I just don't follow them. I have no clue what's going on there. Like, again, like Jurassic Park. I can't say that that's a franchise that I like, because there's only there's one really outstandingly good movie in that whole thing, and that's the first one. All the other ones are varying degrees of it's okay. That's it.
Yeah,
with the exception of 2 of them.
But, like, for example, let's use Obi Wan here. I'm just gonna choose to believe none of this happened. None of it happened. In my head, I've already come up with a storyline that was like this. The storyline in my head makes way more sense than what was here. I'm going to ignore it. I'm just going to ignore that it happened. Now, it's going to be canon in the timeline. So, I guess my point is, I feel like it's just easy for us to just say, I don't really care. Like, this story starts at A and it goes to Z, and they're putting all the different letters in between. But letter Y makes no sense because they fucked it all up. So I'm just going to ignore it. Doesn't count.
Yeah, it's easy to write something off as not canon when it's like a standalone thing. Like, 0 parts of the original trilogy rely on anything that happens in Obi-Wan. So it's very easy to just say, oh, well, Obi-Wan didn't happen. Like, if there was some sort of...
Well, what do you mean by that? Because Obi-Wan, they're taking dialogue and stuff that was in the original trilogy and throwing it back to... Obi-Wan, like at the very end when he tells Leia, we can't tell anybody about me, so that all leads into why Princess Leia doesn't say, hey, remember that time you saved my life and stuff? Why don't you come help me out now, Obi-Wan or Ben? They're setting up stuff that leads into the original trilogy.
They're doing callbacks, but the original trilogy still works on its own, because I'm guessing when you watch the original trilogy, you weren't scratching your head going, wait, they didn't tell me how Princess Leia has ever heard of Obi-Wan. Like there are no gaps in the original trilogy story that are filled in by the Obi-Wan series.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like if there was some sort of gaping plot hole in the original trilogy, and the fix to that plot hole was in this series, then I would be saying, all right, the future stuff depends on this. I will accept. I will begrudgingly accept this as canon. Like,
so you would say, like we were talking about
up.
prequels, you don't think there's any prequels that are good. What would you say of Rogue One then? Rogue One is a prequel to A New Hope, like literally leads into it. Would you say that's an example of a prequel that worked just fine?
Yeah, the prequel worked fine. If I like a movie, I'm not going to write it off as canon. But again, there were no real. Was there? If you didn't like Rogue One and you wanted to say I don't consider this canon, I think that would be fine. Again, is there a plot hole?
I did not like Rogue One, but I also have no fucks to give about its canonicity or not because I don't remember that movie.
Yeah, but I guess I have rules when I'm willing to just say, all right, I do not consider this thing canon, and those rules seem to be like, whatever comes after this, is it relying on this thing that I hate in any way? And I don't think any part of the original trilogy, everything that happens in the original trilogy can still happen with or without Rogue One and the Kenobi show, and there are no plot holes generated by excising them from continuity.
So what would be an example of something that would be the opposite of that? That a prequel, like an original story, does rely on something that a prequel did.
Maybe Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I say maybe because I haven't seen it.
Okay, because I guess I'm kind of struggling. I understand your point. I'm just trying to find an example that would go the opposite of way of what you're saying. So if you're like, well, Rogue One doesn't have any problem, you can not consider that canon, or Kenobi, because it doesn't affect the original trilogy. But what would be an example opposite of that in any media where something in a prequel would affect the story set in the future? Do you know any examples off the top of your head?
I just, as a rule, I don't watch many prequel things, but I can tell you that Transformers and Beast Wars are in the same continuity, and Beast Wars introduces a whole shitload of concepts that just absolutely do not fucking work in the Transformers world. But then Transformers has done subsequent stories where all of these characters are involved, so you kind of just have to accept that the things that don't make any sense still somehow happened to enjoy the future part of these stories.
Well, technically because now we're in my world. Okay, now we have a side rant. So so technically, because Beast Wars is a sequel, because Beast Wars is taking like Maximals and Predacons, they are Decepticon and Autobot descendants. So it happens long after the Great War, but there is time travel, so they go back in time to prehistoric Earth. So does that make it a sequel prequel or a prequel or what does that make it?
It's a sprequel.
What are some of those things that don't work for it?
The whole concept of a spark just does not work whatsoever in the Generation 1 world.
Yeah, because they just fucking create Transformers out of spare parts.
In the original Transformers, they could just Optimus Prime can just go to the junkyard and pick up parts and just build the new Transformer, and it will be alive. And then in Beast Wars, it introduces the whole concept of sparks, which are Transformers' souls, essentially.
And they kept up. Beast Wars introduces that, and it's been in every form of Transformers ever fucking since.
Yeah, so maybe that's what I mean. The original Transformers itself is a prequel to Beast Wars, and it made original Transformers not make a lick of fucking sense. But so many Transformer things have still find their origination in the Generation 1 continuity that I kind of just have to go with it.
It's like,
But also,
I don't know.
I don't watch a lot of prequel things because, as a rule, I hate prequels, and so I don't know that I have any great examples. But luckily, the things that I choose not to accept as continuity tend to be standalones or one-offs.
Okay. I mean, I've never watched any of that Transformer stuff, so I will take your guys' word for it. I just think it's I do agree with you in the sense of if it's a sort of I consider the original trilogy, it's all sort of like one kind of contained story, right? It's a three-part story, a beginning, a middle, and an end, just over the span of 3 movies, rather than just like a 90-minute film. So I can totally see that. Like, can I watch Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker, and then just say, well,
Second 7-2 of the night.
I can say, well, that representation of Luke Skywalker, I reject it. That's not canon anymore. And in my head, Luke Skywalker is actually completely different, and different things play out, and, you know, fuck what Lucasfilm tells me.
Let me back up a second. It's the whole in my head thing that I refuse to do. Let's go back to the original trilogy. Let's pretend that for 40 years now there was somehow a mystery of how Princess Leia knew Obi Wan Kenobi. Like, just the movie, just somehow they know each other, and there needed to be an explanation of how they knew each other, and we didn't get it. And Obi-Wan, the show that we all just watched and hated, is how they tell that story. At that point, because some hole in the original trilogy now relies on Obi-Wan to fill in that hole, to plug in that gap, in my head, even though I didn't like Obi-Wan, I would accept it as canon because I would be unwilling to write a fanfic and choose to see my fanfic as actual canon.
Well, see, I don't know if it's necessarily writing fanfic in that particular case that you mentioned, because you could still at some point say, well, fine, the Kenobi show happened, but I ignore it, and I'm just going to leave the mystery of how they know about each other.
Well, that's fine, but I'm saying if you for some reason felt the need to have that mystery solved, I'm not willing to make something up. This is just my own weird thing. Like, I feel like I have to. I feel like I'm not going to like it, but I'm going to accept it because now the story is linked in a way that it can't really be unlinked unless they, remake Obi Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, and I don't think I really have that issue. I mean, I just feel like, well, this didn't happen this way, and in my head, I have a better story. And that's the story that's going to play out. And that's how, like, if there was a mystery, right, and that mystery needed to be solved for whatever reason, and I'm like, okay, in my head, this is how she knew about Obi Wan Kenobi, and this makes sense to me. And then Lucasfilm officially comes out and makes a show where it's either a awful explanation or it causes more problems. It just creates more questions for other things. Then I'm just going to think, no, I've been thinking this one way about how it would have happened for 40 years, and that's just what I'm going to stick with. Like, I feel like I can differentiate and just excise the crap and be like, no, in my head, the story is better if it goes this way. I don't really care if Lucasfilm tells me that's at the time, in the moment, that's how they see it, when they can just go 10 years later and decide to retcon it somehow if they want. Comic books do this all the fucking time. They constantly retcon everything. The Spider-Man thing is a big deal. Like, One More Day, right? The whole Mephisto thing. Spider-Man fans just, they have to deal with the fact for, like, the past 15 years, Mary Jane and Peter Parker aren't together. And they're reading stories where they're not together anymore and they don't know each other. They're kind of changing that recently in the comics. But still, most Spider-Man fans like, nah, no, I just reject it. This didn't happen. And they're going to retcon it.
How do you reject it but then keep reading the stories? Like, you're...
where everything... Because, like, my understanding is, like, a lot... For the bulk of Spider-Man fans, it's not so much like they're not together anymore. It's that Peter Parker, their beloved character, cut a deal with the fucking devil.
He did.
But what I don't get here is,
like, Aunt May.
if you reject One More Day and you reject that massive retcon, then I get it, because that was fucking stupid. Do you continue to buy the comics? Because if you're buying the comics, then in every story you're having to go through and say, all right, that panel didn't happen, and this panel didn't happen, and that panel didn't happen, and I would lack the ability to do that.
It's
no,
not
you're
like
just telling yourself that because you're still reading it and you're still following along with the story, keeping up with the story beats, even though you just really don't like that particular story beat.
Yeah, it's not like I'm sitting here rejecting panel after panel in my mind. It's more like compartmentalizing. Like, if I'm watching a story of Spider-Man on an adventure in England helping out Captain Marvel or some shit like that, Mary Jane is not going to be, there doing anything, right? Spider-Man's off doing his own thing, having adventures, whatever. I don't need Mary Jane in every single panel to be like,
So in your story example here, where Spider-Man goes off to save the day, according to Marvel at that time, they're broken up, but you're telling yourself that they're happily married and Mary Jane's just at home during the same time.
Yeah, basically. I'm just saying, she's just
Weird.
off panel.
I can't do that.
Yeah, to me it's not a problem.
I wish I could do that. Can't do it.
Yeah, to me it's not a problem.
I feel like if I reject something as continuity, I can't... If I reject something as continuity, I can't, enjoy the future things that spring from that thing that I just rejected.
Yeah, that's how sane people would do it. After Alien 3, because here's a franchise that is full of fucked off movies. It's like Alien 3, depending on the day, I can either look at it as, this sucks, or, it's interesting. But it's like, Alien 4 just completely sucks and shits the bed. It's like, after that moment, it's not that I just pretend like every other cool thing doesn't happen. It's just like, no, I'm just kind of done with the franchise after that point, because it's burned me. And I just don't follow along with it anymore.
Yeah, if Obi-Wan had some sort of deep ties to the original trilogy, where the events of the original trilogy now somehow could not happen without the events of Obi-Wan, I would have to tell myself that Obi-Wan is in canon, and I would hate it, but I can't divorce the things when they have so many links. Again, luckily, Obi-Wan has basically, aside from same characters being in it, no part of the original trilogy relies on the events of Obi-Wan happening. Thankfully, because if somehow there was a plot hole in A New Hope that Obi-Wan fills in, I would be having a very different conversation about how angry I am that I have to accept this as what actually happened.
Well, don't you think that it is causing a little bit of problems, or at least, there's going to be problems with the Jedi Underground Railroad and all that stuff, and establishing all of these different Jedi survived and all of that. Where are the Inquisitors during the original trilogy? Where's all this stuff? I mean, I guess they haven't told the story.
That's a Rebels problem.
Yeah, those aren't problems for the original trilogy. Those are problems for these shows that we're currently watching.
Right, but all of
everything that happens in the original trilogy can still happen regardless of what these shows do.
Sure, but I guess these properties are kind of in a unique situation because they're constantly creating more and more stories around them. Right? It's a property that will live in perpetuity. There will always be Spider-Man stories, no matter what. Eventually, it'll all be retconned back where him and Mary Jane are together, blah, blah, blah. With these stories, do you view the original trilogy as just its own story? Or are you looking at all of this stuff that they're calling canon and weaving together as one giant story? And if you're looking at it as one giant story that they're just, putting a chapter here, chapter there, then to me, it's going to be a problem because you're going to start looking at the original trilogy and being like, wait a minute. How did this happen in the original trilogy when it's been established that this was going on right around the same time? That doesn't make any sense. So I feel like there's a danger zone that we can get into with that. But yeah, I agree. I can compartmentalize things, and I might be insane for that. But to me, I'm just kind of I feel like canon itself, people are just almost too beholden to it. And I say that after just bitching for 2 hours about how Obi-Wan fucked everything up, in my opinion, just screwed up characters and stuff like that. But I'm just going to look at Darth Vader as a character, for example, and be like, nope, nothing he did in here is anything. That's not his character. I ignore it all. And
so what would happen? Let me ask you a question. Like, what would happen if this show, Obi-Wan, had just been fucking awesome? Amazing story from start to finish. Yeah, everything made sense. All of the characters were amazing, and then the show ends with Obi-Wan executing Vader. Like, no doubt about it, Vader is fucking dead. How would you treat it then? How would you treat it if it was good, but it blatantly did not fit with the original trilogy?
I would probably, in my mind, I would treat it sort of like an Elseworlds sort of thing. Honestly, because I think I would look at it in terms of like something like Injustice or something. It's just a different, like a multiversal sort of situation. If it was amazing and he died, I'm like, okay, they're just giving me this really cool, interesting side story that has nothing to do with the rest of the Star Wars universe. I'd probably be fine with it.
So why can't we relegate everything that doesn't make sense or that we don't like to just an Elseworlds?
I'm arguing you might be able to. That's kind of like my whole point. I'm just kind of saying, like, I think that a lot of this stuff, like, we're all locked into a timeline. It's like a linear timeline that everybody feels like. Ronan brought it up earlier. He doesn't like the prequels because it fucks up everything in his mind with the original trilogy. It causes too many questions, too many problems. The Jedi should not have been forgotten. Blah blah blah. But let's maybe you look at the prequels as like an Elseworlds thing that's not connected to the original trilogy because you reject the fact that it causes all these problems with the original trilogy. So if you looked at it that way as its own thing, would it matter? Like, would it then be bad to you technically? Would this be a way for us to be like more at peace? For like what a Jedi would say, you're more at peace with the entertainment and the content that you're watching because you're not sort of locking yourself into every little detail of everything has to match up with what happened over here, because that's what happens. We overly focus on the negative. We want everything to make sense. And I say this as someone who just complained about this with Obi Wan Kenobi. We need it to make sense. I think all of us are kind of beholden to stuff because we've been trained to look at media that way. We've been trained to look at everything as sort of like a linear timeline, and it's all going to line up, and when it doesn't work out, we say, fuck you, you didn't know what you're doing, you fucked it all up, causes problems, now I look at this a different way because blah blah. I think kind of my argument is like, should we even look at any of this stuff that way? Should we just look at, can Ronan, can you look at the prequels as an Elseworlds tale? Hey, not related to the original trilogy whatsoever. This is just its own thing. George Lucas decided to do his own thing, and I'm going to enjoy it for what it is rather than letting it ruin the enjoyment of other stuff that I like that's of the same property. Did that make any sense at all? I don't know.
I don't think anything that we've been talking about for the last hour makes any sense. You can probably just cut all this.
Yeah, because like on the one hand, it's like I understand, like it's like the whole idea of like, well, can't this be an Elseworld story? It's like, yeah, it can, but you have to tell us that it is, because otherwise, the reason why canon matters in any franchise you're talking about, the reason why it matters in Star Wars, Star Trek, Aliens, Jurassic Park, Transformer, pick your franchise in there. The reason why the canon or lore, whatever term you want to describe for it, matters is because those are the rules of how this universe operates. And when you start to take away the rules of how the universe operates, for whatever particular thing that you're in, like when you take away the rules, the guidelines are gone, and so now you get the Halloween franchise, where it's just like where it went way off the rails, and now it's got starts and stops, and these aren't connected to this, and this isn't connected. Like the same sort of thing with Terminator. Where that's what happens.
Right, but
that's what happens when your franchise is.
I agree with that point of the Halloween franchise, but nobody really cares. That's the thing. Like, we only seem to really care about these cultural touchstone properties that, like Star Wars. Horror fans look at the Halloween franchise, and very few people, like, the new Blumhouse one, right, was a direct sequel to the first John Carpenter one. Ignored all of the subsequent ones, and it ignored sort of like, there's all kinds of weird shit in that. But horror fans aren't sitting there like pissed off and complaining about how the continuity, like, we'll joke about it, we'll laugh about how the continuity of the Halloween films doesn't make any fucking sense, but there is this vitriol, like, this, you're ruining
it's also
everything.
Told to you before you go into it.
We are told that this is a new branching off point, and so we are, like, everything you saw before, like, this is a different canon. Like, we're talking about when something doesn't make any sense, but the movie producers, the directors, like, tell you, no, this is all actually happening in the same timeline, even though that doesn't make any sense.
So
like
you need
First
Ronan,
Class.
like Ronan, you need George Lucas to come out and say, that's its own thing, doesn't connect to my original trilogy at all, and then suddenly you'd be okay with it?
I still would. It wouldn't make those movies good. They're still like, I still hold up. Like, I have yet to hear anybody give me an argument that puts the Plinkett reviews like down. They like, it's like until somebody can go through and explain why all of that, because those movies are not fucking good. They're just not good. So like, you can, like, George Lucas could come out and say, yeah, you know what? I've decided that the prequels they're in their own separate universe now. I'm going to create my own brand new beginning. It's like, he can do that, but that doesn't suddenly mean those movies are good.
But you wouldn't have any complaints then about how it's not lining up to the original trilogy and causing the
suddenly
problems.
The continuity problems would be gone if he did that.
They'd be gone.
Yeah.
So you just need someone to say, this ain't in the quote-unquote canon timeline. When I'm arguing there should really, I don't know if there needs to be canon timelines anymore, honestly. I don't.
Well, I mean, like, Star Wars is one of those sort of things where it's like, because they fucked up the canon's timeline with it so badly, at this point, it might need some major retcons to start to make things make sense, because they have fucked it up so badly. Like, so it might need what you're talking about. But at the same time, like, what you're talking about is essentially justification for Rian Johnson doing The Last Jedi. Because he could just clearly say, it's like, well, yeah, I didn't care about that. I wanted to make my own movie, and if you didn't like it, fuck you. That's essentially, like, because he didn't care about Luke Skywalker's character or how it's been established in, like, thousands of novels or whatever. He just didn't care. Like, no, this is the story I want to tell, and if you don't like it, fuck you. So like that does kind of seem like what you're talking about here is like, should we be beholden to canon? Rian Johnson didn't, and that did not work. Yep. That's why I say canon is important. Those are the rules. Dim's the rules. Luke Skywalker, as established, does X, X, and X. That's how Paul Feige controls the canon, controls the keys for Marvel. That's why it's held up relatively well. There are plot holes in Marvel, yes, 100%. But relatively speaking, it holds up because anytime somebody goes to play in his sandbox, he tells them, here's the rules. In my sandbox, you tell this, like, the story has to hit this, and this check mark. So that's the part about all this that I'm confused with, and the whole thing of where you're saying is like, I don't think canon matters. If it doesn't matter, then why are you upset about Last Jedi?
But here's the thing, like, if I say canon doesn't matter, and you use The Last Jedi as your example, what if The Last Jedi had turned out amazing? I think there's ways that you could have done the Luke Skywalker character that's different than what was shown that might have been really cool and might have blown me away. So I don't necessarily think just because someone does something outside of what established canon sort of calls for, that it's always 100% of the time going to be bad. Now I'm struggling to come up with sort of an example off the top of my head right now, but I would like to believe that something could be done which is unique and novel with a character that isn't completely fundamentally changing everything about them. But again, I can't come up with an example off the top of my head, so it's hard for me to defend that.
You can do a character change, like in a story.
Well, they tried to do that with Boba Fett, right? They're trying to do that with Boba. Let's talk
about something. Like, that Boba Fett's a good example. Like, Ronan was talking about, like, stories need rules. You need to know how this world operates, who does what, and who can do what. Like, Boba Fett, like, never set up any fucking rules. And therefore, that story never fucking worked. Like, we didn't know what anyone could do, what anyone was capable of. Boba Fett was just kind of chasing shit, doing his own thing without any real fucking organization whatsoever. Like, it didn't work because there were no rules put into the show.
Well, I'm looking at Boba Fett in particular, and I think this is kind of interesting because I think I even said this on our show, and the listeners can go back and listen to that if they want. But I can buy, like, Boba Fett, yes, you're right, Ronan. In the original trilogy, he has like 5 minutes of screen time. If that, he's a blank slate for most people who are watching that. So I think the majority of people who just were watching the Book of Boba Fett probably really liked it because they had no backstory. You and I, Steve, we all know that Boba Fett in the expanded universe was this, amazing badass, kind of like the John Wick character. Supposedly, yeah. But that's how people thought of Boba Fett. So the actual series, I said I can get on board with them changing his character and him trying to turn a new leaf. That was fine. That was not my criticism of the show. My criticism of the show is they kind of botched the execution of it. So I think that would be a perfect example of a fundamental the fundamental idea of what a character is in Star Wars that they were attempting to change, that I was on board with because I could buy the entire concept of, okay, he's a changed person, he's been with the Tusken Raiders, he's trying to sort of go good, for lack of a better term, but they just turned him into a complete idiot. Had they done that exact same storyline, but he made smart decisions, and they just tweaked a few things here and there to not make him be the dumbest character on that show, I don't think we would have had any problems with the show. I think everyone would have been like, wow, that was a pretty good show. I enjoyed the character. It was based on, like, the rules that were being created for Boba Fett. What were those rules? He was a changed person. He was trying to rule with respect instead of by force. He didn't want to do what he was doing in the past. They set those rules up in that show, I would argue, for the story that they were telling. The problem with that was they just fucked it all up. And they kept making decisions in that show where the character who was setting, here are my rules, but he was going against what his own rules were a lot of the times, which is why we had complaints about it. But had they not done that, I think that Boba Fett show would have been fantastic, and no one would be bitching about it, no one would be complaining. There would still be people who would say, yeah, I didn't like the fact that he turned to a good guy. I disagree with that, but it gets back to what I was saying about Reva. I have no problem with Reva being a youngling, seeing Anakin kill her friends and all that stuff. I have a problem with the execution of how they set that up. They set up in the show Reva as these things, X, Y, and Z. This is what she's about, and then she does the dumbest things possible throughout the entire show, and that's my problem. Did that make sense? Did I answer any of your questions?
I don't think any of this canon conversation has made sense, and it should probably just fucking die.
Okay.
And be cut.
Okay. Well, with that, everyone,
I don't know that any of us made a single fucking point for the last hour and a half.
I've made outstanding points. I don't know
if we
about
did,
you.
ladies and gentlemen, please leave a comment. Tell us what you think. Should we be beholden to canon? Does canon matter? Does it not matter? Let us know in the comments, 2 or 3 listeners who check out this show, what you thought. With that, I don't have anything else. Do you guys have anything? What do we got coming up? We got Thor Love and Thunder, right? We all going to go see that?
I'm going to see that.
Yeah, that'll be good.
We have one more thing left, this poker game go.
Oh, yes. Before
we gotta go all in blind.
Gotta go all in blind. So, next episode...
can't do it right now.
Yeah, next episode we'll be doing Thor Love and Thunder, because I think that comes out like a week or so. But before we wrap up tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go all in blind on the next hand. And we're going to see... Steve, you won last time, right? You got it?
Yes.
Ronan, have you ever won on the last hand when we do this?
No, I've had games like this where I busted out, but now I'm like ahead, like almost 50,000. And then the second we do this stupid thing, I lose. So
That's happened to me a lot.
Okay, well we're gonna
so
see
yeah,
here.
I've never won the last hand.
I'm just gonna like kill. There's a full house on the board, and Ronan's just lucky enough to have a fucking 9 on his hand. So I'm just gonna bail on this, and then we're gonna go all in.
Now you'll never know.
This is the most
know.
exciting
Fine.
part of the night, guys. This right here.
Yeah, that canon conversation definitely wasn't the most exciting thing.
I'm just gonna
cut
leave
that
it all
whole
in. Who
fucking thing out.
cares?
No, cut all
Who
that out.
cares? Leave
The
it all.
people that care about rules.
Look at all these people bailing. Okay, here we go.
Alright, alright,
Don't
all
look
in
at your
blind.
cards. Okay. All in. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, you can follow along if you're listening to this in a separate tab on Chrome. Come back over to this tab. Watch how this all plays out. Ronan's all in. We'll discuss.
Come on, dude.
This guy.
Aw.
Two,
Pair of twos.
8-7 Kings. Okay,
Come
here we
on,
go.
twos. Come
Steve
on,
is in the
twos.
lead.
Not by much.
Oh,
okay.
you got 2 pair. That sucks.
Give me 2. Give me a 2.
You're gonna win again.
Give me a 2.
I'm out. I
Come
can't
on,
win.
no 7s. Oh yes. Oh, feels good.
Ronan
I
lost
basically
all of his
earned-
money.
I earned back everything that I lost tonight. That's great. That's fantastic.
I don't know why do I keep doing this? Why?
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out. Stay tuned next week or whenever for Thor: Love and Thunder, where hopefully we like it and we don't bitch about it, because that's all this podcast has turned into, is us bitching about everything.